What if I told you that clicking on the wrong link could change everything you thought you knew about human nature? That somewhere beneath the surface of the internet you use every day, there are spaces where the worst impulses of humanity play out in real time, watched by ordinary people who've stumbled too far down the rabbit hole. I'm a marketing consultant from Manchester. Nothing particularly exciting about my life. I help small businesses figure out their online presence, manage their social media, that sort of thing. Last autumn, between clients, I found myself with too much time and a dangerous amount of curiosity about the parts of the internet I'd only heard whispered about in tech forums. It started with a legitimate research project. One of my clients had been targeted by online harassment, and I wanted to understand how these campaigns typically operated. Someone mentioned that the real coordination often happened on the dark web, away from the scrutiny of mainstream platforms. Setting up Tor felt like crossing a line I shouldn't cross, but I told myself it was just research, professional development. The first few weeks were disappointing, to be honest. Mostly just drug markets and forums discussing things that would get you arrested if you posted them on Facebook. The whole thing felt less sinister than I'd expected, more like a slightly seedy car boot sale than the digital underworld I'd imagined. But then I started hearing about red rooms. The concept seemed absurd at first. Live streams where viewers could supposedly watch and influence violent acts happening in real time. Most people I encountered online dismissed them as elaborate hoaxes, digital urban legends designed to part gullible people from their Bitcoin. The technical challenges alone made it seem implausible. The bandwidth limitations of anonymity networks, the difficulty of maintaining stable connections, the enormous resources required to operate such services without getting caught. Yet some users insisted they'd encountered the real thing. They described details that seemed too specific to be complete fabrications. Hidden payment systems using obscure cryptocurrencies, invitation-only access requiring vouchers from existing members, sophisticated streaming infrastructure that somehow worked despite the limitations of anonymous networks. My professional instincts kicked in. How would someone actually build such a system? What kind of technical infrastructure would be required? It became a puzzle I couldn't let go. The same way I might obsess over a particularly challenging marketing campaign or branding problem. The research consumed my evenings for months. I learned about cryptocurrency mixing services, about layered VPN systems, about streaming protocols designed for unreliable connections. I discovered communities where people discussed theoretical approaches to anonymous video distribution, always careful to frame everything as academic security research. Around Christmas time, I found something that changed the trajectory of my investigation entirely. It was buried in a discussion about experimental streaming technology, presented not as anything sinister, but as a demonstration of new protocols designed for secure communications. The poster claimed it was a proof of concept for a system that could work in authoritarian countries with heavy internet censorship. The link led to a sparse login page. No branding, no explanation, just username and password fields. Below that, a note indicating that new accounts required an invitation code from an existing member. I should have closed that browser tab immediately. Instead, I spent the better part of January trying to work out how to get access. The breakthrough came through my legitimate work. I'd been helping a small cybersecurity firm with their content marketing, writing blog posts about privacy tools and network security. One of their consultants, someone I'd worked with on several projects, sent me a private message asking if I'd be interested in beta testing a new streaming platform designed for privacy-conscious users. The timing felt like more than coincidence. I accepted. The authentication process was more sophisticated than I'd expected. Beyond basic credentials, the system required verification through a custom application that generated time-sensitive codes. It reminded me of the security systems used by online banking, the kind of multi-factor authentication you'd expect from financial institutions. When I finally gained access, I was struck by how professional everything looked. Clean interface design, intuitive navigation, the kind of user experience you'd expect from a legitimate streaming service. There was a list of available channels on the left, chat functionality on the right, and a video player dominating the center of the screen. Most channels appeared to be offline. The active ones had cryptic titles, usually just random combinations of letters and numbers. Viewer counts were relatively low, rarely more than 50 or 60 people. The chat sections were mostly empty, with only occasional messages in languages I couldn't identify. I clicked on one of the active channels. The video quality was poor, as expected through anonymity networks, pixelated, choppy, with noticeable delays. It took several seconds to understand what I was looking at. A small room with concrete walls, lit by harsh fluorescent lighting. In the center, a metal chair with someone sitting in it. The person appeared unconscious or heavily sedated. Their head lolled forward, unresponsive to sounds coming from somewhere off camera. The chat section remained empty, except for automated system messages noting the timestamp. I watched for perhaps 15 minutes, waiting for something to happen. Nothing did. The person didn't move. No one entered the frame. The chat stayed silent. Eventually, I switched to another channel. The second stream showed what looked like an abandoned warehouse. Concrete floors, rusted metal fixtures, industrial lighting casting harsh shadows. The camera was positioned to show the entire space. But like the first stream, nothing happened while I watched. No movement, no sound, no activity in the associated chat. Over the following hours, I sampled roughly a dozen different channels. Most showed similar scenes: empty rooms, unconscious or restrained individuals, industrial or basement settings. The production values varied dramatically. Some appeared professional, with multiple camera angles and clear audio. Others looked like amateur recordings from mobile phones or cheap webcams. What struck me most was the absence of the interaction I'd expected. Despite claims that these platforms allowed viewer participation, I saw no evidence of real-time control or influence. No voting mechanisms, no polling systems, no way for viewers to communicate with whoever was operating the streams. The chat functions existed but remained largely unused. I began to suspect I was looking at elaborate recordings rather than live content. The technical limitations that skeptics had pointed out seemed valid. Maintaining stable, interactive video streams through anonymity networks would require significant resources and expertise. Perhaps these were pre-recorded videos designed to create the illusion of live participation. But then I discovered a channel that shattered that assumption completely. The title was different from the others. Not random characters, but actual words. Fulfillment Session 47. The viewer count was significantly higher, over 100 people. The chat section showed active messages, though they were mostly numbers and brief phrases that meant nothing to me initially. The video showed a residential setting rather than the industrial spaces I'd seen before. Someone's sitting room, complete with furniture, decorations, family photographs on the mantelpiece. It looked normal, comfortable, like any middle-class British home you might visit. A person sat on the sofa, facing the camera directly. Unlike the unconscious subjects in other streams, this individual was alert, making eye contact with the lens. They appeared nervous but not panicked, as if they understood what was about to happen and had somehow accepted their situation. The chat suddenly exploded with activity. Messages appeared rapidly, too fast for me to read them all. Numbers, coordinates, simple commands. Most were in English, but I recognized fragments of other European languages mixed throughout. That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The timestamp on one of the chat messages matched exactly the time showing on my computer clock. Not approximately, precisely, down to the second. These weren't pre-recorded videos. This was happening right now, in real time. Someone entered the frame from the left side of the screen. They wore dark clothing with their face obscured, but their movements seemed deliberate, controlled. They approached the person on the sofa and handed them what appeared to be a sheet of paper. The person read whatever was written there. Their expression transformed from nervous to genuinely terrified. They started to rise from the sofa, but the masked figure placed a hand on their shoulder, gently but firmly guiding them back down. The chat messages became more frequent and specific. I began to understand that they weren't just comments, they were instructions. The numbers corresponded to locations within the room. The brief phrases were commands for actions to be performed. The viewers weren't just watching, they were directing what happened next. The person on the sofa looked directly at the camera again, and I realized with growing horror that they could see us. Not individually, but they knew we were there, watching, participating. Their eyes held a desperate pleading that I'd never witnessed before in any film or television program. I slammed the laptop shut immediately. For nearly a week, I avoided my computer entirely, except for essential work tasks. I told myself it had been an elaborate hoax, a piece of performance art designed to disturb people like me who'd wandered into spaces we had no business exploring. The production values had been too polished, the technical execution too smooth. Surely real criminal operations don't invest that kind of effort into user experience design. But I couldn't stop thinking about that timestamp, the perfect synchronization between the chat messages and my system clock. The way the person on the sofa had looked through the camera, as if they could see directly to the people watching on the other side. After 4 days, I began checking local news websites obsessively. Missing persons reports, unexplained incidents, anything that might connect to what I'd witnessed. I found nothing, which should have been reassuring but somehow made everything worse. I never returned to that platform. I uninstalled Tor, deleted the cryptocurrency wallets I'd created during my research, reformatted my hard drive multiple times. I changed all my passwords, switched to new email providers, even replaced my router with a different model from a different manufacturer. But the questions remained. Had I witnessed something real, or had I been subjected to an elaborate psychological experiment? How do you verify something that exists entirely in the shadows, that leaves no trace in the legitimate world? 8 months have passed since then. I've attempted to return to my normal routine, focusing on client work, avoiding the darker corners of the internet entirely. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm working on a campaign or reviewing analytics, I'll notice the timestamp in the corner of my screen and remember that moment of perfect synchronization. The worst part isn't wondering whether what I saw was real. The worst part is knowing that somewhere out there, other people are still watching, still participating, still directing what happens to individuals whose faces they'll never be able to forget. And sometimes I wonder if there's a record somewhere of everyone who accessed that platform, everyone who watched what I watched, everyone who closed their laptops at the crucial moment. Whether my name is on a list, whether someone, somewhere, is still keeping track. I've become more paranoid about online security since then. I monitor my network traffic regularly, check my systems for unusual activity, maintain better operational security practices than any marketing consultant has any reason to need. Not because I'm doing anything wrong now, but because I can't shake the feeling that someone, somewhere, might still be watching me. The internet feels fundamentally different now. Every click, every page load, every moment of connectivity carries the weight of knowing what's possible in the spaces between legitimate websites. The surface web that most people know is exactly that, a surface concealing depths that most people never imagine exist. I still work in marketing. I still help businesses establish their online presence, manage their digital communications, build their brands. But now I understand that the threats aren't just technical or competitive, they're human. And the people who operate in those hidden spaces have resources, expertise, and motivations that go far beyond what most of us can comprehend. Sometimes I receive emails from technology companies, invitations to test new privacy tools, requests to review anonymity-focused platforms. I delete them immediately without reading past the subject line. I've learned that curiosity, even professional curiosity, can lead you to places you can never truly leave behind. The person on that sofa is still out there somewhere, or they're not. I'll never know which, and that uncertainty follows me through every day, every project, every quiet moment when I'm alone with my thoughts and my computer screen. That's the real horror of it all. Not knowing becomes its own kind of prison, and the people who build these systems understand that perfectly. They know that witnesses are bound by their complicity, that knowledge becomes a burden too heavy to share with anyone who might actually be able to help. I've never told anyone about this experience. Not friends, not family, not the police. Who would believe it? And what would I tell them? That I found something on the dark web that might have been real. That I watched something I shouldn't have watched and then fled. But I'm telling you now, and I'm not entirely sure why. Perhaps because the weight of keeping it secret has become unbearable. Perhaps because I hope that sharing it will somehow make it less real, less immediate, less present in my daily thoughts. Or perhaps because I've started to suspect that the real purpose of those streams isn't the content itself. Perhaps it's creating witnesses, people who carry the knowledge of what's possible, who spread that knowledge through whispers and implications and stories that can never be properly verified. Perhaps I'm doing exactly what they intended me to do all along. Imagine losing your job on a Tuesday and finding something that changes your entire understanding of human nature by the following weekend. That's essentially what happened to me last spring, though I suppose the sequence of events had been building for longer than I realized at the time. I'd been working as a freelance graphic designer in Leeds for the better part of 3 years. Nothing glamorous, mostly small business logos and website mock-ups, but it paid the rent on my bedsit and kept me fed. The work dried up gradually at first, then all at once when a couple of my regular clients decided to use AI tools instead of paying an actual person. Can't say I blame them really. Hard to compete with something that costs nothing and works around the clock. With suddenly abundant free time and a dwindling bank balance, I found myself spending more hours online than was probably healthy. Started browsing forums I'd never paid attention to before, reading about cryptocurrency, privacy tools, things I'd previously dismissed as too technical or too paranoid for normal people to bother with. Someone in one of these forums mentioned the dark web in passing, describing it as a place where you could find anything if you knew where to look. The comment was quickly deleted by moderators, but it stuck in my mind. I'd heard the term before, obviously, but always in the context of news articles about drug arrests or cybercrime investigations. Never occurred to me that ordinary people might actually use it for legitimate purposes. The setup process was simpler than I'd expected. Downloaded Tor, followed some basic security guides, and within an hour I was browsing hidden services that existed completely outside the normal internet. The initial experience was disappointing, to be honest. Mostly just drug markets and forums discussing illegal activities, none of which interested me particularly. But I kept exploring, driven more by boredom than genuine curiosity. Found communities dedicated to privacy advocacy, whistleblowing platforms, forums for people living under authoritarian governments. Started to understand that the dark web wasn't just criminals and extremists. It was also journalists, activists, ordinary people who needed to communicate without surveillance. After a few weeks of casual browsing, I stumbled across discussions about something called red rooms. The concept seemed ridiculous initially. Live streaming platforms where viewers could allegedly watch and influence violent acts happening in real time. Most people discussing them insisted they were urban legends, elaborate hoaxes designed to separate gullible users from their Bitcoin. The technical arguments against their existence seemed sound. The bandwidth limitations of anonymity networks, the difficulty of maintaining stable video streams, the enormous resources required to operate such services without getting detected by law enforcement. Everything pointed to red rooms being nothing more than internet folklore. Yet some users claimed to have encountered genuine examples. They described specific technical details that seemed too elaborate to be complete fabrications. Sophisticated payment systems, invitation-only access requiring references from existing members, streaming infrastructure that somehow overcame the limitations of anonymous networks. My design background made me curious about the technical aspects. How would someone actually build such a system? What kind of user interface would be required? It became a theoretical problem I couldn't stop thinking about, the same way I might obsess over a particularly challenging design brief. The research consumed several weeks. I learned about cryptocurrency mixing services, about video compression algorithms, about distributed hosting systems, discovered communities where people discussed theoretical approaches to anonymous streaming, always careful to frame everything as academic research or security testing. In mid-April, I found something that shifted my investigation from theoretical to practical. It appeared in a thread about experimental video technologies, presented as a demonstration of new streaming protocols designed for high-latency networks. The poster described it as a proof of concept for communications systems that could work in areas with unreliable internet infrastructure. The link led to a basic authentication page. No branding or explanation, just fields for username and password. Below that, a note indicating that new accounts required invitation codes from existing users. I spent the next fortnight trying to work out how to get access. Posted carefully worded questions in various forums, hoping someone might share an invitation or point me toward whoever was distributing them. Got nowhere. The breakthrough came through pure chance. I'd been helping a small web development company with some logo work, essentially working for free because I needed portfolio pieces more than I needed payment. One of their junior developers, someone I'd barely spoken to previously, messaged me asking if I'd be interested in testing a new streaming platform focused on user privacy. The timing seemed suspicious, but I accepted anyway. The authentication process was more complex than I'd anticipated. Beyond basic login credentials, the system required verification through a mobile application that generated time-sensitive codes. Reminded me of online banking security, the kind of multi-factor authentication used by financial institutions. When I finally gained access, the interface was surprisingly polished. Professional design, intuitive navigation, clean typography. Looked like any mainstream streaming service, the sort of platform you might use to watch films or television programs. There was a sidebar listing available channels, most of which appeared to be offline. The active ones had generic titles, combinations of letters and numbers that conveyed no information about their content. Viewer counts were modest, typically between 20 and 40 people. The associated chat functions were mostly empty. I selected one of the active channels at random. The video quality was poor, as expected through anonymous networks. Heavily compressed, pixelated, with noticeable lag between audio and video. It took several moments to understand what I was looking at. A small room with bare walls, lit by a single overhead bulb. Someone was sitting on a wooden chair in the center of the frame. The person appeared to be sleeping or unconscious. Their head was tilted forward, and they didn't respond to occasional sounds coming from somewhere off camera. The chat section showed only automated timestamps generated by the system. I watched for perhaps 20 minutes, waiting for something to happen. Nothing did. The person remained motionless. No one entered the frame. The chat stayed empty. Eventually, I switched to a different channel. The second stream showed what looked like a basement or cellar. Concrete walls, exposed pipes, fluorescent lighting. The camera was positioned to show the entire space, but like the first stream, nothing occurred while I watched. No movement, no activity, no interaction in the chat. Over the following evening, I sampled about 10 different channels. Most showed similar content: empty rooms, unconscious individuals, institutional or industrial settings. The production quality varied significantly. Some appeared professionally shot with multiple camera angles. Others looked like amateur recordings from cheap equipment. What puzzled me was the absence of the interaction these platforms supposedly offered. Despite claims about viewer participation and real-time control, I saw no evidence of such functionality. No voting mechanisms, no command interfaces, no way for viewers to influence what happened on screen. I began to suspect these were pre-recorded videos rather than live streams. The technical challenges that skeptics had identified seemed valid. Maintaining stable, interactive video through anonymous networks would require substantial resources and expertise. Made more sense that these were archived recordings designed to create the illusion of live participation. But then I discovered a channel that completely changed my understanding of what I was looking at. The title was different from the others. Not random characters, but actual words. Session 23, Community Request. The viewer count was significantly higher. Nearly 200 people. The chat section showed constant activity, messages appearing faster than I could read them. The video showed a residential setting. Someone's kitchen, complete with appliances, crockery, personal items scattered about. Looked like any working-class British home, the kind of place where normal people lived normal lives. A woman sat at the kitchen table, facing the camera. Unlike the unconscious subjects in other streams, she was alert and aware, making direct eye contact with the lens. She appeared frightened, but not panicked, as if she understood her situation but hadn't completely given up hope. The chat exploded with messages, numbers, single words, brief phrases in multiple languages. Most were in English, but I recognized fragments of German, French, what might have been Russian. The messages appeared to follow some sort of pattern or structure, though I couldn't decipher what it meant. That's when I noticed something that made everything else irrelevant. One of the chat messages included a timestamp that matched exactly what was showing on my computer. Not approximately, precisely. down to the second. This wasn't a recording. This was happening right now. A man entered the frame from behind the camera. He was wearing ordinary clothes, jeans, a dark jumper, nothing distinctive or threatening about his appearance. He approached the woman and placed a mobile phone on the table in front of her. She picked up the phone and appeared to read something on the screen. Her expression shifted from fearful to genuinely terrified. She started to stand up, but the man placed his hand on her shoulder, not violently but firmly enough to guide her back into the chair. The chat messages became more frequent and specific. I started to understand that they weren't just comments. They were instructions. The numbers corresponded to actions or locations. The brief phrases were commands for what should happen next. The viewers weren't just watching. They were directing the entire situation. The woman looked directly at the camera again, and I realized she could see the viewer count. She knew exactly how many people were watching, knew that we were all participating in whatever was about to happen to her. Her eyes held a kind of desperate appeal that I'd never seen in any film or television program. I closed the browser immediately and shut down my computer. For the better part of a week, I avoided going online except for essential tasks. Told myself it had been an elaborate performance, a piece of interactive theater designed to disturb people who'd stumbled into spaces they shouldn't have been exploring. The production values had been too professional, the technical execution too smooth for something genuinely criminal. But I couldn't stop thinking about that timestamp, the perfect synchronization between the chat and my system clock, the way the woman had looked through the camera, as if she could see directly to the people controlling what happened to her. Eventually, I started checking local news websites, missing persons reports, unexplained incidents, anything that might relate to what I'd witnessed. Found nothing, which should have been reassuring but somehow made me more uneasy. I never returned to that platform. Uninstalled Tor, deleted everything related to my dark web browsing, reformatted my hard drive twice, changed my passwords, closed the email account I'd been using, even moved to a different flat across town. But moving doesn't change what you know, and the questions followed me to the new address. Had I witnessed something real, or had I been the subject of an elaborate psychological experiment? How do you verify something that exists entirely outside official channels, that leaves no trace in the legitimate world? That was 7 months ago. I eventually found new work, doing design projects for local businesses again. Tried to return to something resembling a normal routine. But sometimes, usually late at night, when I'm working on a project, I'll notice the time display on my computer and remember that moment of perfect synchronization. The worst part isn't wondering whether what I saw was genuine. The worst part is knowing that somewhere, right now, other people are watching similar streams, participating in similar situations, directing what happens to people whose faces they'll carry with them forever. And sometimes I wonder if my name is recorded somewhere, whether there's a database of everyone who accessed that platform, everyone who watched what I watched, everyone who closed their browsers when things became too real, whether someone, somewhere, is keeping track of witnesses. I've become considerably more careful about online security since then. Use VPNs for everything, monitor my network traffic, maintain operational security practices that most graphic designers have no reason to need. Not because I'm doing anything wrong, but because I can't shake the feeling that somewhere out there someone might still be keeping tabs on people like me. The internet feels different now. Every website I visit, every click I make, carries the knowledge of what exists in the spaces between legitimate services. The surface web that most people know is exactly that, a surface, hiding depths that most people never imagine are there. I still do design work, still help businesses with their branding, their websites, their marketing materials. But now, I understand that the threats people face online aren't just technical or financial. They're human. And the people who operate in those hidden spaces have resources and motivations that go far beyond what most of us can comprehend. Sometimes I get emails from technology companies, requests to test new platforms or privacy tools. I delete them without reading past the subject line. I've learned that curiosity, even professional curiosity, can lead you to places you can never really leave behind. The woman in that kitchen is somewhere right now, either living with the memory of what happened after I closed my browser, or not living at all. I'll never know which, and that uncertainty has become a constant companion, following me through every ordinary day of my ordinary life. That's the real horror of these systems. Not the violence or the voyeurism, but the way they create witnesses who can never speak about what they've seen. People who carry knowledge they can't share, bound by complicity they never intended to accept. I've never told anyone about this. Not friends, not family, not the authorities. What would I say? That I found something on the dark web that might have been real? That I watched something terrible happen and then ran away? But I'm telling you now, and I'm not sure why. Maybe because keeping it secret has become its own kind of prison. Maybe because sharing it might somehow make it less real, less immediate, less present in my thoughts. Or maybe because I've started to suspect that creating witnesses was always the point. That the real purpose of these platforms isn't the content itself, but the people who stumble across them, who carry the knowledge forward through stories that can never be properly verified. Maybe by telling you this, I'm doing exactly what they wanted all along. Picture this. You're going through life, you have a few close friends, you're relatively happy and all is well. Then, one day, you borrow your neighbor's internet connection, and it changes everything. You never imagined it would lead you into the darkest corners of human behavior. That a simple act of digital trespassing could make you a witness to things that happen every day, just out of sight of people like us. I'm a night shift worker at a 24-hour Tesco in Birmingham. Have been for the past 2 years, stocking shelves and dealing with the occasional drunk customer between midnight and 8 in the morning. It's not glamorous work, but it pays enough to cover the rent on my studio flat and leaves my days free for sleeping and not much else. The internet in my building has always been unreliable. The landlord installed the cheapest possible broadband years ago and hasn't upgraded it since. Most evenings when I'm trying to unwind before work, the connection drops out completely or slows to the point where even basic websites won't load properly. Around Christmas last year, I noticed that one of my neighbors had left their Wi-Fi network unsecured. The signal was strong enough to reach my flat, and the connection speed was significantly better than what I was paying for. I told myself I'd only use it temporarily, just until I could sort out proper internet service for myself. The network was called Deep Access 01, which seemed like an odd name for a home connection, but I didn't think much of it at the time. People choose strange names for their networks. I've seen everything from FBI surveillance van to pretty fly for a Wi-Fi in my building. For several weeks, everything worked perfectly. Better than perfectly, actually. The connection was faster and more stable than any internet service I'd ever used. I could stream videos without buffering, download files in seconds, browse multiple websites simultaneously without any noticeable slowdown. It was during one of these late-night browsing sessions that I first encountered something unusual. I was looking through Reddit, jumping between different communities, when I clicked on a link that seemed to take longer than usual to load. When the page finally appeared, it wasn't what I'd expected. Instead of the typical Reddit interface, I was looking at what appeared to be a directory listing. Rows of folders and files with cryptic names organized by date and time. It looked like the back end of a website, the kind of administrative interface that normal users aren't supposed to see. I assumed I'd clicked on a broken link or encountered some sort of server error, tried refreshing the page, but got a different view of the same type of directory structure. Different files, different folders, but the same basic layout. Most of the folder names were meaningless combinations of letters and numbers, but a few had descriptions that caught my attention. Things like archive sessions and live feeds and request queue. The file sizes were enormous, much larger than typical documents or images. Curiosity got the better of me. I clicked on one of the folders labeled Archive Sessions. What opened was another directory, this one containing video files. Hundreds of them, organized by date and numbered sequentially. The file names didn't provide any information about their content, just timestamps and reference numbers. I selected one at random and clicked on it. The video opened in a basic media player, no fancy interface or streaming platform branding, just a simple window with standard playback controls. The video quality was surprisingly good, much better than I'd expected for files that seemed to be stored on someone's personal server. The content showed what looked like a basement or cellar. Concrete walls, minimal lighting, basic furniture. Someone was sitting in a chair in the center of the frame, though the image quality made it difficult to make out specific details about them. I watched for several minutes, waiting for something to happen. The person in the chair appeared to be unconscious or sleeping. No one else was visible in the frame, and there was no audio beyond a faint ambient hum. Eventually, I got bored and tried a different file. This one showed a different location, what might have been a garage or workshop. Similar setup, different person, same lack of activity. I began to suspect these were test recordings or placeholder content for some sort of streaming service. Over the next few evenings, I explored more of the directory structure, found folders containing what appeared to be live streaming software, payment processing systems, user management databases, everything you'd need to run a professional video platform, but hosted on what seemed to be a residential internet connection. The live streaming folder was particularly interesting. It contained software I'd never heard of, applications designed for anonymous broadcasting over encrypted networks. The documentation mentioned compatibility with Tor and other privacy-focused systems. That's when I started to understand what I was looking at. This wasn't just someone's personal media collection. This was the infrastructure for a dark web streaming service, the kind of platform I'd read about in forums, but assumed were mostly urban legends. I should have stopped exploring at that point, should have disconnected from the network and pretended I'd never seen any of it. Instead, I kept digging deeper, found a folder labeled Current Operations that contained what appeared to be real-time data, server logs, user statistics, financial records. The numbers were staggering. Thousands of users, hundreds of thousands of pounds in cryptocurrency transactions, server costs that would make most small businesses bankrupt. The user logs showed people connecting from all over the world, accessing content at all hours of the day and night. The financial records indicated that viewers were paying significant amounts to access premium content, with additional fees for what the system described as interactive services. But it was the content scheduling system that made everything clear. A calendar showing planned streaming sessions, each one tagged with location details, participant information, and viewer capacity limits. The language was clinical, bureaucratic. like something you'd see in a corporate project management system. Except the projects being managed were real people, and the calendar showed that a session was scheduled to begin in less than an hour. I found the live streaming interface and accessed it using credentials I'd discovered in one of the configuration files. The platform looked professional, with a clean user interface and robust streaming capabilities. There was a chat system, payment processing, viewer analytics, everything you'd expect from a legitimate streaming service. The scheduled session appeared in the interface as Location 7, Premium Interactive, max 50 viewers. The stream wasn't active yet, but there was a countdown timer showing roughly 40 minutes until it began. I waited, telling myself I was just curious about the technical aspects of how such a system might work, that I was investigating out of professional interest, not personal entertainment. When the timer reached 0, the stream activated automatically. The video showed a room I hadn't seen in any of the archived files. Looked like someone's living room, complete with family photos, children's toys scattered about, the kind of domestic space where normal people lived normal lives. A man sat on the sofa, facing the camera. He was clearly awake and aware, looking directly into the lens with an expression I'd never seen before. Not quite fear, not quite resignation, but something in between that suggested he understood exactly what was about to happen. The chat system activated as soon as the stream began. Messages appeared from viewers around the world, most of them numbers and brief phrases in various languages. Within minutes, there were nearly 50 people watching, all of them typing commands and instructions. That's when I realized what I was witnessing. This wasn't just a streaming service. It was an interactive platform where viewers could direct what happened to real people in real time. The chat messages weren't comments, they were orders. Someone entered the frame from off-camera. They were holding what looked like a tablet device, which they showed to the man on the sofa. He read whatever was displayed on the screen, and his expression changed from resignation to genuine terror. The chat messages became more frequent and specific. I started to understand that the viewers were voting on what should happen next, with the most popular suggestions being implemented by whoever was operating the camera. The man on the sofa looked directly at the camera again, and I realized he could see the viewer count. He knew exactly how many people were watching, knew that dozens of strangers were deciding his fate through an anonymous chat system. I closed the browser and unplugged my computer from the wall. Spent the next 3 days calling in sick to work, barely leaving my flat, trying to convince myself that what I'd seen was some sort of elaborate performance art or psychological experiment. The production values had been too professional, the technical infrastructure too sophisticated for something genuinely criminal. But I couldn't stop thinking about the man's expression when he'd read that tablet, the way he'd looked through the camera, as if he could see directly to the people controlling what happened to him. Eventually, I contacted my internet service provider and arranged for proper broadband installation. Stopped using my neighbor's connection entirely, though I never figured out which flat it was coming from. The building has 12 units, and I've never been social enough with the other residents to know who might be running that kind of operation. I moved out 2 months later, found a different flat across town, told myself it was for completely unrelated reasons, better neighborhood, shorter commute to work, that sort of thing. But moving doesn't change what you know, and the questions followed me to the new address. Had I witnessed something real, or had I stumbled across an elaborate piece of interactive fiction? How do you verify something that exists entirely in the shadows, that leaves no trace in the legitimate world? That was nearly a year ago. I still worked the night shift at Tesco, still live alone in a studio flat, still spend my evenings browsing the internet before work. But I've become much more careful about which networks I connect to, which links I click, which rabbit holes I'm willing to explore. Sometimes, usually when I'm stocking shelves during the quiet hours between 3 and 5 in the morning, I'll think about that countdown timer, about the professionalism of that streaming platform, the sophistication of the user interface, the global audience participating in real-time decision-making. The worst part isn't wondering whether what I saw was genuine. The worst part is knowing that somewhere right now, similar platforms are operating with similar audiences. And people like that man on the sofa are looking into cameras just like that one. And sometimes I wonder if my access to that network was really accidental. Whether someone in my building noticed my internet usage patterns and deliberately left their connection unsecured, knowing that someone like me would eventually find what they wanted me to find. Whether I was supposed to discover that platform, supposed to witness what I witnessed, supposed to carry that knowledge forward into my ordinary life as a night shift worker in Birmingham. I've never told anyone about this. Not colleagues, not friends, not the authorities. What would I say? That I used someone else's Wi-Fi and found something that might have been real? That I watched something terrible happen and then disconnected? But I'm telling you now, and I'm not entirely sure why. Maybe because the weight of keeping it secret has become too much. Maybe because sharing it might somehow make it less real, less immediate, less present in my thoughts during those quiet hours at work. Or maybe because I've started to suspect that creating witnesses was always the point. That platforms like that don't just exist to serve their paying customers, but to generate people like me who carry the knowledge of what's possible in the spaces between legitimate internet services. People who understand that the surface web is exactly that, a surface, concealing activities that most people never imagine are happening, right alongside their Netflix subscriptions and social media feeds. Maybe by telling you this, I'm doing exactly what whoever runs Deep Access, 01, intended from the beginning. Maybe that's how these things spread and survived, through stories told by people who stumbled across them accidentally and can never quite forget what they saw. Maybe the real product isn't the streams themselves, but witnesses like me who carry the knowledge forward, who plant seeds of awareness in the minds of people who might otherwise never imagine such things exist. I still live in the same city, still work the same shifts, still browse the internet during my free time. But I've never again seen a network called Deep Access 01, and I've never again found directory structures like the ones I explored that winter. Sometimes I wonder if they're still operating from somewhere in my old building, still running streams for global audiences, still creating new witnesses who will carry their own versions of this story forward. And sometimes, late at night, when I'm alone with my computer, I catch myself looking for unsecured networks, wondering what I might find if I started exploring again. That's perhaps the most disturbing part of all. Not the horror of what I witnessed, but the lingering curiosity about what else might be out there, just a few clicks away from the ordinary internet that most people think they know. Have you ever been in the situation where you do something seemingly normal, something routine, and it completely changes your life? I'm curious, what would you do if you took your laptop in for a simple repair and end up discovering that the ordinary-looking guy in the computer shop is involved in things that would make your worst nightmares seem tame? That the person fixing your webcam issue has been using that same webcam to watch you for months? I work as a teaching assistant at a primary school in Coventry. There's nothing particularly exciting about my life. I help 7-year-olds with their reading, supervise playtime, and assist the main teachers with various administrative tasks. The pay isn't brilliant, but I enjoy working with children and the holidays are decent. Last autumn, my laptop started acting up. The webcam would activate randomly, the little green light flickering on for a few seconds before switching off again. Sometimes I'd catch it happening while I was using the computer. Other times I'd notice it had been on when I returned from making tea or using the bathroom. Initially, I assumed it was a software glitch. Ran virus scans, updated drivers, tried all the usual troubleshooting steps you find online. Nothing worked. If anything, the problem seemed to be getting worse. The camera would activate more frequently, sometimes staying on for several minutes at a time. Eventually, I decided to take it to a local repair shop. The place was called Digital Solutions and occupied a narrow storefront between a charity shop and a kebab restaurant. I'd walked past it hundreds of times but never really noticed it before. The kind of business that blends into the background of everyday urban life. The owner was a middle-aged man named Trevor, who seemed knowledgeable about computers and quoted reasonable prices for the repair work. He explained that webcam issues were common, usually caused by corrupted drivers or malware infections. Said he'd need to keep the laptop for a few days to run comprehensive diagnostics and clean up the system. I dropped it off on a Wednesday morning and was told it would be ready by the weekend. Trevor provided a receipt and assured me that all customer data would remain private and secure during the repair process. That evening, I realized how much I relied on my laptop for basic activities, checking emails, browsing social media, watching streaming services before bed. Without it, I found myself with unexpectedly free time and nothing particular to do with it. On Thursday evening, I decided to walk past the shop to see if it was still open. The storefront was dark, but I could see light coming from what appeared to be a back office or workshop area. Trevor was working late, presumably fixing computers like mine. As I walked past, something caught my attention. Through the window, I could see multiple computer screens displaying what looked like video feeds. Not the typical desktop view you'd expect from computer repair work, but actual video streams showing various rooms and locations. I slowed down to get a better look, trying to appear casual while examining what was visible through the window. The video feeds showed different domestic spaces, bedrooms, living rooms, home offices. Most appeared to be empty, though a few showed people going about their normal evening routines. My first thought was that Trevor might be running some sort of security monitoring service alongside his computer repair business. Many small business owners take on multiple revenue streams to make ends meet. Nothing particularly suspicious about that. But something felt off about what I was seeing. The camera angles were wrong for professional security installations. Too intimate, too focused on private spaces rather than entry points or valuable items. These looked more like hidden cameras than security systems. I continued walking, but the image of those video feeds stayed with me. That night, I found myself wondering about my own laptop, about the webcam issues I'd been experiencing, about how long Trevor had been aware of the problem before I brought the computer to his shop. On Friday, I called to check on the repair progress. Trevor said the work was taking longer than expected, that he'd discovered more extensive malware infections than initially apparent. He'd need the weekend to complete the cleaning process, but the laptop would definitely be ready by Monday. This gave me an excuse to walk past the shop again Friday evening. Same pattern as the night before, dark storefront, lights in the back office, multiple screens displaying video feeds of domestic spaces. This time, I counted at least 6 different feeds visible through the window. One of them showed a young woman in what appeared to be her bedroom, getting ready for bed. The camera angle suggested it was positioned somewhere high up, possibly hidden in the ceiling fixture or ventilation grate. She had no idea she was being watched. Another feed showed a family watching television in their living room. 2 adults, 3 children, completely unaware that their private evening was being broadcast to Trevor's monitoring setup. The camera quality was good enough to make out facial features and read text on the television screen. I realized I was looking at a surveillance operation, not a security service. These were people being watched without their knowledge or consent, probably through compromised webcams in devices they'd brought to Trevor for repair, devices like my laptop. When I collected my computer on Monday, Trevor was friendly and professional, explained that he'd removed several malware infections and updated all the security software, said the webcam issues should be completely resolved, and provided documentation of all the work he'd performed. I paid the repair fee and took the laptop home, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was fundamentally wrong with the entire situation. That evening, I covered the webcam with electrical tape and began researching how to detect covert surveillance software. The diagnostic tools I downloaded found several programs I didn't recognize, applications that weren't listed in the standard software inventory, but were definitely present on the system. Most appeared to be related to remote access and file sharing, the kind of software that could allow someone to control a computer from a distance. I spent the next several days learning about digital forensics, about how to trace network connections and monitor system activity. What I discovered was disturbing. My laptop was regularly connecting to IP addresses I didn't recognize, uploading small amounts of data at consistent intervals. The connection logs showed that these uploads had been happening for months, long before I'd taken the computer to Trevor for repair. But the frequency and volume of data transfer had increased significantly since getting the laptop back from his shop. I started documenting everything. Screenshots of the network activity, records of the suspicious software installations, photos of Trevor's shop taken from the street. Built a comprehensive file of evidence, though I wasn't sure what I planned to do with it. That's when I decided to investigate Trevor's operation more thoroughly. Started walking past his shop at different times, observing patterns in his work schedule and customer traffic. Noticed that he seemed to specialize in devices with cameras, laptops, tablets, smartphones with front-facing cameras. Most of his customers appeared to be ordinary people dealing with routine technical problems. Students with slow computers, parents with virus-infected family laptops, elderly people who'd accidentally installed malicious software, all of them trusting Trevor to fix their problems and protect their privacy. One evening, I saw something that changed my understanding of what Trevor was actually running. Through the back office window, I could see him interacting with what appeared to be a live streaming interface. Multiple video feeds were active, but now there was chat functionality alongside the video streams. People were watching the feeds and commenting in real time, not just watching, but requesting specific actions or camera angles. Trevor was responding to these requests, apparently controlling which feeds were visible and how the surveillance was conducted. This wasn't just unauthorized monitoring. This was a commercial operation, selling access to private surveillance footage to paying customers around the world. I recognized one of the video feeds immediately. It showed a bedroom that looked exactly like mine, filmed from the angle where my laptop usually sat on the dresser. The electrical tape I'd placed over the webcam was visible in the corner of the frame, but the camera was somehow still transmitting video from inside my flat. Trevor had installed multiple surveillance devices during the repair process. The webcam issue I'd originally brought to him was probably his doing in the first place, a way to identify potential surveillance targets and get access to their devices. I left the area immediately and went home to search my flat thoroughly. Found a tiny camera hidden in the smoke detector above my bed, another one built into what looked like a standard electrical outlet near my desk. Professional installations, nearly invisible unless you knew exactly what to look for. The devices were connected to my home Wi-Fi network, probably configured during Trevor's access to my laptop and password information. They'd been broadcasting footage of my private life to his streaming platform for weeks, maybe months. I documented everything with my phone camera, then carefully removed the surveillance devices without damaging them, kept them as evidence, along with all the digital forensics information I'd gathered about the compromised laptop. But when I tried to report the situation to police, I encountered a problem I hadn't anticipated. The officers I spoke with seemed knowledgeable about traditional crimes, but struggled to understand the technical aspects of what I was describing. Digital surveillance, dark web streaming platforms, cryptocurrency payment systems. It was outside their normal area of expertise. They took my statement and collected the physical evidence, but explained that investigating this type of cybercrime would require specialist resources that might not be available immediately. Said they'd be in touch once they'd consulted with their digital forensics team. That was 4 months ago. I've heard nothing back from police, and Trevor's shop is still operating normally. Same storefront, same repair services, same trusting customers bringing their camera-equipped devices to be fixed. I moved to a different flat across town, replaced all my electronic devices, took comprehensive security precautions to prevent future surveillance. But moving doesn't change what you know, and the knowledge of what Trevor is doing follows me through every ordinary day. The worst part isn't knowing that I was watched without consent. The worst part is understanding how many other people are probably being watched right now. People who trust their local computer repair shop to fix their problems and protect their privacy. Trevor's operation depends on that trust, on people like me who need technical help and assume that small business owners are fundamentally honest, on the invisibility that comes with running a boring, everyday service that nobody pays much attention to. I've started noticing other computer repair shops around the city, wondering how many of them might be running similar operations. How many ordinary-looking technicians are actually surveillance entrepreneurs, selling access to private footage through dark web streaming platforms. Sometimes I wonder if reporting Trevor to police was the right decision, or if I should have tried to expose his operation through other means: media attention, social media campaigns, direct warnings to his potential victims. But all of these approaches would require evidence that I'm not sure I could provide without admitting to my own illegal surveillance of his activities. That's the genius of operations like Trevor's. They create witnesses who are bound by their own complicity, people who can't report what they've seen without acknowledging their own borderline criminal behavior. I've never told anyone else about this experience. Not colleagues, not friends, not family members. What would I say? That my computer repair guy was running a surveillance operation, and I discovered it by spying on his business. That I removed hidden cameras from my own flat, but can't prove where they came from. But I'm telling you now, and I'm not entirely sure why. Maybe because the weight of keeping it secret has become too much. Maybe because sharing it might somehow make it less real, less immediate, less present in my daily thoughts. Or maybe because I've started to suspect that creating witnesses was always part of Trevor's business model. That people like me who discover what he's doing are meant to discover it. meant to carry the knowledge forward through stories that can never be properly verified. Maybe the real product isn't just the surveillance footage, but the awareness that such surveillance is possible. The understanding that any electronic device could be compromised, that any repair technician could be more than they appear to be. Trevor is still operating his shop, still fixing computers and installing surveillance equipment, still running his streaming platform for customers around the world. And somewhere in Coventry, other people are probably walking past his storefront right now, thinking about getting their webcam issues fixed by a friendly, knowledgeable local businessman. Maybe by telling you this, I'm doing exactly what Trevor's operation requires to survive and spread. Creating awareness, planting seeds of paranoia, making people more conscious of the surveillance possibilities that exist in their ordinary digital lives. Maybe that's how these things work. Not just through the technical infrastructure of hidden cameras and streaming platforms, but through the social infrastructure of witnesses who carry the knowledge forward, who ensure that the awareness of such possibilities becomes part of the general consciousness. I still work at the primary school, still help children with their reading, still live a fundamentally ordinary life. But now I understand that ordinary life exists alongside operations like Trevor's, that the surface of everyday business conceals activities that most people never imagine are happening. And sometimes, late at night, when I'm alone in my new flat with my new laptop, I find myself wondering if Trevor was really working alone, or if he was part of something larger. A network of repair shops and surveillance operations, all feeding content to the same streaming platforms, all serving the same global audience of people who pay to watch strangers in their most private moments. That might be the most disturbing possibility of all. Not that one creepy computer repair guy was running a surveillance operation, but that such operations are common enough to sustain entire industries, entire ecosystems of people who make their living by violating the privacy of ordinary people who just needed their laptops fixed. The thing about being watched is that you can often feel it before you see it. That prickle at the back of your neck, the sense that something's not quite right. I used to think that was just paranoia, the sort of thing people made up to make their boring lives feel more dramatic. Then my flatmate Jake brought home that encrypted flash drive, and I learned exactly how it feels when strangers turn your entire existence into entertainment. It was a Tuesday evening in March, raining as usual, and I was sprawled on our old sofa in our shared flat in Bethnal Green. Jake burst through the door, soaked and grinning like he'd just discovered fire. He pulled this tiny USB stick from his jacket pocket, waving it about like it was the crown jewels. The drive contained what he claimed was research material for his dissertation on underground digital communities. According to Jake, some postgrad student had been investigating the darker corners of the internet before dropping out suddenly, left all their stuff behind, including this drive that supposedly contained access credentials to parts of the dark web most people never see. Now, I'm not completely naive about these things. I work in graphic design, spend most of my day online, and I'd heard the stories about hidden marketplaces and illegal content floating around encrypted networks. But I'd never actually ventured beyond downloading the odd film or album through BitTorrent. The dark web seemed like something for proper criminals or paranoid journalists, not ordinary people from East London. Jake was persistent though. He'd already downloaded Tor and was fumbling about with something called Tails, trying to get the whole anonymous browsing setup working on his ancient laptop. The credentials on the drive included a list of .onion addresses and what appeared to be login details for various sites. Most of it looked like standard dark web fare, drug marketplaces, fake document services, that sort of thing. But there was one address that kept catching my eye, mainly because it was accompanied by a warning written in red text. Access at own risk. Active participants only. The address led to something called a red room. Jake explained these were supposedly live streams where viewers could watch real violence unfold, sometimes even paying to influence what happened. He insisted they were mostly urban legends, elaborate hoaxes designed to separate gullible punters from their cryptocurrency. But the way he kept glancing at that particular address suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. We spent the next hour setting up the security protocols. Multiple VPN connections, encrypted browsers, the works. Jake treated it like we were preparing for some covert military operation, rather than satisfying morbid curiosity. Looking back, maybe his paranoia wasn't entirely misplaced. The first few sites we visited were disappointingly mundane. Drug markets that looked like budget versions of Amazon, forums full of people arguing about encryption methods, and what appeared to be a surprisingly active community dedicated to reviewing different brands of tinfoil hats. The whole thing felt less like exploring the criminal underworld and more like browsing a particularly rubbish version of eBay. But then we found the Red Room. The site looked professional in a way that immediately set it apart. Clean interface, proper navigation, even what appeared to be customer service chat boxes. It was called the Viewing Room, and accessing it required both the credentials from Jake's drive and a payment of roughly £50 worth of Bitcoin. Jake had some cryptocurrency left over from a previous ill-advised investment in some dodgy altcoin, so we decided to take the plunge. What we found inside wasn't what either of us expected. The main page displayed a grid of thumbnail images, each representing a different stream. Most were dark or showed empty rooms, but 3 or 4 appeared to be active. Viewer counts ranged from a handful to several hundred. The interface allowed you to join streams as a passive observer or upgrade to what they called participant status for additional fees. Jake clicked on one of the active streams before I could stop him. The video quality was surprisingly good. We were looking at what appeared to be a small, windowless room with concrete walls. A single chair sat in the center, occupied by a person whose face was obscured by the camera angle. They appeared to be restrained, though the specifics weren't clear. A chat box ran alongside the video, filling with messages from anonymous viewers. The messages were what made my stomach drop. Viewers were making requests, offering payments for specific actions. The amounts being discussed weren't trivial. Hundreds of pounds for relatively minor things, thousands for more serious requests. And someone was apparently fulfilling these requests because the person in the chair would occasionally move or react in ways that corresponded to the chat messages. Jake and I sat there for maybe 10 minutes, not saying anything, just watching this unfold. The casual nature of it was what disturbed me most. Viewers chatted amongst themselves like they were watching a football match, debating techniques and comparing prices. Some seemed to be regulars, referencing previous streams and making recommendations to newcomers. That's when Jake noticed something that made both of us go cold. One of the usernames in the chat was posting comments that included specific details about our location. Not just London or even East London, but references to Bethnal Green, our street, even our building. The user seemed to know we were first-time viewers and was offering to arrange a private demonstration for educational purposes. We closed the laptop immediately. The next few days passed normally enough. I went to work, Jake attended his lectures, and we didn't discuss what we'd seen. But I found myself checking the locks on our flat more frequently. and I noticed Jake had started closing his bedroom curtains during the day. The email arrived on Friday. It came to my personal Gmail account, not an address I'd ever used for anything related to the dark web. The sender was listed as viewing room services at Proton Mail, and the subject line simply read, "Thank you for your interest." The message was brief and professional. It thanked me for visiting their site and invited me to participate in an upcoming special broadcast. They mentioned that they'd identified me as someone with graphic design skills who might appreciate the artistic elements of their productions. The email included a Bitcoin address and instructions for making a deposit to secure what they called a front row seat. What made my blood freeze was the final paragraph. It mentioned that they'd noticed I lived in a ground floor flat with easy access through the kitchen window, and suggested that if I wasn't interested in viewing their content, perhaps I'd be interested in starring in it. I showed Jake the email, and his face went white. He'd received something similar, though he's focused on his film studies background, and suggested he might want to document the experience from the inside. We decided to ignore the messages and hope they'd lose interest, delete the emails, wipe Jake's laptop, pretend the whole thing had never happened. But the messages kept coming. Not just emails now, but text to my mobile number. WhatsApp messages with photos of our building taken from across the street. Someone had even slipped a printed note under our front door, written in the same professional tone as the emails, but with increasingly specific details about our daily routines. They knew when I left for work each morning, what time Jake usually returned from university, which takeaways we ordered from and how often. Someone was watching us, documenting our lives with the same casual attention to detail I'd seen in that chat room. The breaking point came when Jake found a small camera mounted on the lamppost outside our building. It wasn't a council CCTV camera or anything official, just a small device pointed directly at our windows. Jake climbed up and removed it, but we both knew that if they'd put up one camera, there were probably others. That night, we heard footsteps in the hallway outside our flat. Slow, deliberate steps that paused directly outside our door. The steps would continue for a few minutes, then stop, then start again. We could see shadows moving back and forth under the door gap. But when Jake finally worked up the courage to look through the peephole, the corridor was empty. The next morning, there was another note. This one was different, handwritten rather than printed, with a local postmark from earlier that same day. It contained details about the previous night's activities, describing exactly how we'd reacted to the footsteps, how long we'd waited before checking the door, even what we'd whispered to each other while hiding in Jake's bedroom. Someone had been listening. We went to the police that afternoon, but the response was about what you'd expect. The officer was polite but skeptical, especially when we tried to explain about the dark web and red rooms. He took down our details and said they'd increase patrols in the area, but I could tell he thought we were either making it up or had brought it on ourselves by getting involved with dodgy websites. The surveillance continued for another week. More cameras appeared and disappeared. Messages arrived with increasingly personal details, and we began to notice the same faces appearing in different locations around our neighborhood. People who seemed to turn up wherever we went, always maintaining just enough distance to avoid being obviously suspicious. Jake started talking about moving back in with his parents in Yorkshire. I was considering the same thing, though my parents lived in a tiny village in Somerset, where strangers would be noticed immediately. But before either of us could make concrete plans, the situation escalated. I came home from work on a Thursday evening to find our front door standing open. Not forced, just unlocked and ajar, as if someone had walked in and forgotten to close it properly behind them. Jake's laptop was missing from the kitchen table, along with the flash drive and all the notes we'd been collecting as evidence. But they'd left something behind. On my bed, there was a printed photograph of me sleeping. The angle suggested it had been taken from inside my bedroom, probably the night before. I was lying on my side, facing the camera, completely unaware that someone was standing in my room documenting my unconscious state. Attached to the photograph was a business card with the viewing room logo and a single line of text. "Ready for your audition." Jake and I packed our essential belongings that same evening and left London. We didn't tell anyone where we were going, paid for everything in cash, and avoided using our phones or cards for several days. I stayed with friends in Brighton for a couple of weeks before eventually finding a new flat in a different part of the city. Jake went back to Yorkshire and transferred to a different university. For a while, it seemed like we'd managed to disappear. No more messages, no more surveillance, no more unexpected visitors. I started to relax, began to think that maybe they'd moved on to easier targets. But last month, I received another email. This one came to a Gmail account I'd created specifically for flat hunting in Brighton, an account I'd never used for anything else, connected to a phone number I'd only given to potential landlords and estate agents. The message was brief and familiar. "Thank you for your interest. We've been looking forward to working with you again." Attached was a photograph of my current building, taken from street level, with my bedroom window circled in red. I'm writing this because I'm not sure what else to do. The police in Brighton were even less helpful than the ones in London, and I can't keep running forever. Someone out there has decided that I'm going to be part of their entertainment, whether I want to be or not. The thing that keeps me awake at night isn't just the surveillance or the threats. It's the memory of that chat room, full of ordinary people casually bidding on human suffering, like they were buying items at auction. Hundreds of viewers, all comfortable with the idea that someone else's pain was worth paying for. I keep wondering how many of them are still out there, still watching, still waiting for their next show to begin. And whether the person in that chair, the one we watched for those 10 minutes before we came to our senses, ever made it home to their own flat, their own life, their own false sense of security. The camera outside my current building is smaller than the last one, better hidden, but I spotted it yesterday morning on my way to work. Same angle, same direct line of sight to my windows. I haven't told my new flatmates about any of this. What would be the point? They'd either think I was paranoid or they'd want to leave, and I can't afford to find another place right now. Besides, I'm starting to think it doesn't matter where I go. These people have resources, patience, and apparently unlimited time to devote to their hobby. Sometimes I wonder if this is how it starts for everyone who ends up in those rooms. Maybe nobody volunteers. Maybe they all thought they were just curious observers, right up until the moment they realized they'd become the entertainment. The new email arrived this morning. Same professional tone, same polite language, but with a countdown timer embedded in the message. 72 hours until what they're calling my premiere performance. I'm not going to run this time. There's nowhere left to go, and I'm tired of looking over my shoulder. But I wanted to write this down, get it recorded somewhere, just in case. Maybe someone will read it and think twice before clicking on that suspicious link or plugging in that mysterious USB drive. Or maybe they'll read it and think it sounds made up, like something from a bad horror film. That's probably what I would have thought before Jake brought home that flash drive and we decided to see what all the fuss was about. The timer on my phone says 68 hours remaining. I keep checking it compulsively, watching the numbers tick down like it's New Year's Eve. I never considered myself tech-savvy. Just average, really. I could navigate basic computer functions, use standard software, and handle simple troubleshooting. Nothing special. My job as a data entry specialist for a medical billing company required minimal technical skills, mostly just inputting codes and numbers into pre-designed systems. Monotonous work, but it paid the bills. My roommate Eli was the tech expert between us. Computer science major, spent his free time coding and discussing cybersecurity on forums. Always had 3 monitors running simultaneously, all displaying things I couldn't begin to understand. When our internet connection slowed down for the 3rd time in a month, Eli decided to upgrade our router and reconfigure our home network. That's when everything changed. While setting up the new security features, Eli discovered unusual traffic patterns originating from our IP address. Late-night data transfers, connections to unfamiliar servers, encrypted packets being sent at regular intervals, all happening when both of us should have been asleep. The timestamps showed activity between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. almost every night for the past 6 weeks. I assured him it wasn't me. My laptop was basic and mainly used for streaming shows and occasionally working from home. Eli checked my system anyway, running diagnostic tools I'd never heard of. That's when he found the hidden partition on my hard drive. According to Eli, someone had remotely accessed my laptop and created a separate storage area invisible to standard file explorers. Inside was a Tor browser installation, cryptocurrency wallet software, and a folder containing what appeared to be encryption keys. The browser history showed regular visits to .onion domains, dark web addresses unreachable through normal browsers. The most frequently visited site was something called the Observatory. My first instinct was to wipe the laptop completely, but Eli advised against it. This was evidence of a serious security breach, possibly even criminal activity being conducted through my device. We needed to understand what was happening before eliminating the evidence. Eli suggested setting up monitoring software to see what happened during those late-night sessions. If someone was remotely accessing my laptop, we could capture information about them. For the next 3 nights, we left my laptop powered on, but disconnected from the internet. Nothing happened. On the 4th night, Eli configured it to record screen activity while allowing internet access again. We both slept in his room rather than mine, my laptop left on my desk, its webcam covered with electrical tape just to be safe. The next morning, we reviewed the recordings. At 2:17 a.m., my laptop woke from sleep mode without any physical interaction. The screen displayed the Tor browser launching automatically, connecting to the network, then navigating to an address consisting of random letters and numbers ending in .onion. A login screen appeared, and credentials were entered automatically from saved data. Then the screen went black except for a simple interface, a video player, a chat window, and a timer counting down from 90 minutes. The video showed an empty room with plain walls. For nearly 20 minutes, nothing happened on screen. The chat window occasionally flashed with new messages, but they were in a language neither of us recognized. At the 22-minute mark, a person entered the frame. They wore ordinary clothes, but had their face digitally blurred, not covered, but processed to be unrecognizable. They sat in a chair facing the camera and held up a digital tablet displaying that day's date and time. For the next hour, the person simply sat there while messages continued appearing in the chat. Occasionally, they would shift position slightly or check the tablet. Nothing dramatic occurred. Then, at the 83-minute mark, the person stood up, approached the camera, and adjusted it to pan around the room, revealing a second chair, that had previously been out of frame. The person returned to their original position, and the feed continued until the timer reached 0. Then the browser closed automatically, and the laptop returned to sleep mode. Eli was convinced we were witnessing some kind of scam operation. His theory was that someone had compromised my laptop to use it as a proxy for accessing the dark web, specifically to participate in what appeared to be paid viewings of some underground content. The mundane nature of what we'd seen was puzzling, but Eli explained that dark web red rooms were largely considered urban myths, purported live streams of extreme content that most cybersecurity experts dismissed as scams designed to steal cryptocurrency. We agreed to monitor for one more night before wiping the system and implementing stronger security measures. That night followed the same pattern, except the room shown in the video feed contained both chairs from the start, both empty. After 17 minutes, a person entered, same blurred face effect, and sat in one chair. They held up the tablet with the date and time, then set it aside. The chat window became more active. At the 36-minute mark, a second person entered the frame and sat in the other chair. Their face was similarly blurred. They held up no tablet, made no introductions. Both figures simply sat facing the camera while the chat continued to fill with messages. At the 54-minute mark, both figures stood simultaneously. The first approached the camera and adjusted it again, panning to show more of the room. In the corner, barely visible, was a third chair. The figures returned to their seats. The feed continued until the timer expired. The pattern was clear now. Each night added a new chair, revealed at some point during the broadcast. Eli was still convinced it was an elaborate scam, but couldn't explain the purpose. If someone was paying to watch this, what were they getting for their money? We decided to monitor one more night before taking action. The third recording began the same way. 3 chairs visible from the start, 3 blurred figures entering at different times, each holding up the tablet with the date and time. The chat window was more active than previous nights. At the 62-minute mark, all 3 figures stood, and one adjusted the camera to reveal a 4th chair in the corner of the room. Unlike the others, this chair had restraints attached to the armrests and legs. That was enough. The next morning, Eli helped me completely wipe my laptop, reinstall the operating system, and set up advanced security measures. We changed our network configuration, implemented strict firewalls, and Eli even installed monitoring software on our router to alert us to any unusual traffic patterns. For good measure, I started shutting down my laptop completely at night and storing it in a drawer. A week passed without incident. No strange connections, no unexplained data transfers. It seemed the problem had been resolved. Eli's theory was that my laptop had been randomly targeted by a botnet, compromised through some vulnerability in my outdated security software. The whole Red Room business was likely just a scam targeting people on the dark web, convincing them to pay cryptocurrency to watch increasingly elaborate, but ultimately fake exclusive content. Then I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was simply "Observation continues." The body contained only an attached image file. Against better judgment, I opened it. The image showed my bedroom, taken from the perspective of my laptop's webcam. The timestamp in the corner showed a date from the previous night, at exactly 2:17 a.m. My laptop had been shut down and in a drawer at that time. I showed the email to Eli, who examined the metadata and confirmed the timestamp hadn't been altered. He checked my laptop again, but found no evidence of any compromise or activation. It was as if the image had been taken by a device that wasn't there. That night, we set up a separate camera in my room, positioned to monitor the drawer where I kept my laptop. The recordings showed nothing unusual. No one entered the room. The drawer remained closed all night. Yet the next morning, I received another email with another image of my bedroom at 2:17 a.m., taken from the exact same webcam angle, despite my laptop being securely stored away. Eli suggested staying somewhere else for a few days while he conducted a more thorough investigation of our apartment. I arranged to stay with a colleague and packed enough clothes for a week. Before leaving, I removed the battery from my laptop entirely, rendering it incapable of any function. 3 days into my stay at my colleague's place, another email arrived. Same subject line, same format. The attached image showed me sleeping in my colleague's guest room. The angle was identical to where a laptop webcam would be positioned, if there had been a laptop in the room, which there wasn't. The timestamp showed 2:17 a.m. from the previous night. I returned home immediately, finding Eli surrounded by dismantled electronics. He had been systematically checking every device in our apartment for hidden cameras or unknown surveillance equipment. He found nothing unusual until he examined my old laptop battery that I had removed and left behind. According to him, it had been modified to include a small cellular modem, a component that could maintain a connection to the internet independently of the laptop itself, allowing for remote access even when the computer appeared to be completely powered down. This discovery prompted a more thorough investigation. Eli removed the battery from his own laptop and examined it, finding a similar modification. Further checks revealed that our router, which Eli had purchased online 6 months earlier, contained custom firmware that differed from the manufacturer's specifications. Even our smart TV had been modified to allow remote access to its integrated camera. The implications were clear. Our entire apartment had been compromised, not randomly, but with deliberate and sophisticated precision. Someone had methodically created a surveillance network within our living space, using our own devices against us. Eli contacted a cybersecurity professional he knew from his university, who agreed to examine our equipment. Their conclusion was disturbing. The modifications were professional grade, suggesting resources and expertise beyond typical hackers. The cellular modems in our batteries connected to private networks rather than commercial carriers, making them virtually untraceable. Most concerning was the discovery that these modifications had been in place for at least 8 months, far longer than the 6 weeks of suspicious network activity we had initially detected. We moved out of the apartment the following week, found separate places, disposed of all our electronics, purchased new devices from physical stores rather than online. I changed jobs, started using cash instead of cards whenever possible, and implemented every privacy measure recommended by Eli's security contact. 3 months passed without incident. No strange emails, no unexplained images. Life began to return to a semblance of normalcy, though I still covered any webcam with tape and stored my devices in a signal-blocking pouch at night. Then, last week, I received a package at my new address, an address I had shared with very few people. Inside was a brand new laptop, still sealed in its factory packaging. No note, no return address. I left it untouched and contacted Eli, who arranged for his cybersecurity contact to examine it in a controlled environment. The laptop was factory sealed and appeared completely normal upon initial inspection. The operating system was a standard installation with no obvious modifications. It was only when they disassembled the device that they discovered the anomaly, a custom component integrated into the motherboard. Virtually indistinguishable from the original parts, unless you knew exactly what to look for. According to the security expert, this component would have allowed remote activation of the laptop, even when powered off. More disturbing was their assessment that this wasn't an aftermarket modification. It had been integrated during the manufacturing process, which should have been impossible without inside access to the production facility. Yesterday, I received a text message from an unknown number. It contained only a time, 2:17 a.m. I didn't sleep last night. Instead, I sat in the dark of my new apartment, watching the clock. At exactly 2:17 a.m., every electronic device I owned, my new phone, my replacement laptop, my smart TV, turned on simultaneously, screens displaying the same image. An empty room with 5 chairs arranged in a semicircle. 4 were occupied by figures with blurred faces. The 5th chair, positioned in the center, remained empty. The screens displayed this image for exactly 1 minute before shutting off. I've since disconnected everything, removed batteries, cut power to my apartment. I'm writing this at a public library on a computer that has no connection to me. When I finish, I'm leaving the city, maybe the country. I don't know who these observers are or what they want. I don't know how they've managed to integrate themselves into devices that should be secure, or how they tracked me to my new location. What I do know is that the chairs in that room have been increasing by 1 each night, and the newest chair, the empty one, is meant for me. The most terrifying realization isn't that they're watching, it's that they're waiting. Each night at 2:17 a.m., a broadcast goes live somewhere on the dark web. People pay to watch, to participate in whatever this is, and somehow, through means I can't understand, I've moved from being an unwitting proxy in their observation network to being the subject of their observation itself. If you're reading this and suddenly find your devices behaving strangely, or discover unexplained network activity in the early morning hours, don't make the mistake I made. Don't investigate. Don't monitor. Don't try to understand. Just run. I never intended to find it. Most people who stumble onto the darker corners of the internet are actively looking, following breadcrumbs of urban legends and whispered rumors. Not me. I was just doing my job. I work in digital forensics for an insurance company. Nothing glamorous, mostly analyzing data from car accident claims, verifying timestamps on property damage photos, that sort of thing. Occasionally, we get cases involving potential fraud, where someone might have manipulated evidence. That's what led me down this particular rabbit hole. A claim had come in for a high-end electronics store that had allegedly been robbed. The security camera footage showed masked figures breaking in after hours and methodically clearing out the most valuable merchandise. Standard stuff. But something about the video felt off to me. The timestamps were consistent. The metadata looked normal. But certain compression artifacts appeared in patterns that didn't match typical security camera encoding. I've spent enough time analyzing video to recognize when something's been processed through multiple systems. This footage had signatures suggesting it had been routed through some kind of streaming service before being downloaded and submitted as evidence. Again, not necessarily suspicious on its own. Many modern security systems upload to cloud servers automatically, but combined with a few other anomalies, it merited deeper investigation. I traced the video's digital fingerprint backward, following a trail of encoding signatures and network markers. The insurance company gives us considerable technical leeway when investigating potential fraud, so I had access to specialized tools and databases not available to the general public. What I expected to find was evidence that the footage had been staged, perhaps an inside job disguised as a break-in. What I found instead was a pathway leading to a closed network operating through a series of proxy servers and encryption layers. The security footage hadn't just been processed through standard cloud storage. It had been live streamed to a private audience before being repurposed as evidence for the insurance claim. Professional curiosity got the better of me. I followed the digital trail, using access tools that technically fell within my job description, but definitely pushed ethical boundaries. After 3 days of careful tracing, I found myself looking at an unmarked website, accessible only through specialized routing protocols. The landing page was minimal, just a login screen with no company name, no graphics, no identifying information of any kind. Using analytical techniques that I'd rather not detail, I managed to access the site's back-end database. What I found was a sophisticated streaming platform with hundreds of active feeds organized into categories. Most feeds showed empty rooms, parked cars, streetscapes, or other mundane settings. Each had viewership metrics, timestamping, and user interaction logs. This wasn't some amateur operation. It was a professional-grade surveillance network with global reach. One category caught my attention: scheduled events. Unlike the passive surveillance feeds, these had specific start times, viewer registration requirements, and something called interaction parameters. The most recent scheduled event had occurred the previous night, with the cryptic title Inventory Reduction Phase 3. When I checked the archived footage, I found myself watching the same robbery that had been submitted in our insurance claim. The implications hit me all at once. This wasn't footage of an actual robbery. This was something staged specifically for an audience, filmed to appear like security camera footage, then repurposed as evidence for a fraudulent insurance claim. The thieves were performers. The stolen merchandise was probably moved out through legitimate channels, while the insurance company paid for the supposed loss. Clever as far as fraud schemes go, but what disturbed me more was the viewership data. 63 people had watched this staged robbery live, many paying significant amounts in cryptocurrency for the privilege. The interactive log showed viewers sending real-time messages suggesting how the thieves should behave, which items to take, whether to vandalize the space, how to position themselves for better camera angles. I should have reported my findings immediately, compiled the evidence for our fraud investigation team, and moved on. Instead, I kept digging, curious about the other scheduled events in the system. Most had innocuous titles that gave little indication of their content. Night shift protocol, wellness check 17, conditioning session. The viewership numbers varied from as few as 10 to over 100, with corresponding price tiers. The next scheduled event was something called Home Evaluation Series, Residence 28, set to begin at 1 a.m. the following night. Against every ethical guideline and professional standard, I decided to observe it. I told myself it was necessary for building a comprehensive fraud case. In reality, I was simply curious. A curiosity I've regretted every day since. I took precautions, using a secured connection and routing through multiple proxies. At 12:55 a.m., I accessed the platform and found the upcoming stream already had 47 registered viewers. A countdown timer showed 5 minutes remaining. The preview image displayed what looked like ordinary home security camera footage of a living room. Sofa, television, coffee table. Typical suburban decor. Nothing unusual or particularly interesting. At exactly 1 a.m., the stream went live. The initial view showed the living room from a corner ceiling perspective, mimicking standard home security positioning. For several minutes, nothing happened. The empty room, dimly lit by a small lamp, remained still and silent. The viewership count ticked up to 53. A text interface at the bottom of the screen showed viewers sending messages, most expressing anticipation or discussing technical aspects of the camera setup. At 1:08 a.m., a new camera angle activated, showing what appeared to be a bedroom. A person was sleeping in the bed, unaware of being observed by dozens of strangers. The camera angle was positioned to show the entire room, with particular focus on the bedroom door and window. Again, messages scrolled as viewers discussed the setting, the subject, and something they referred to as entry methods. With growing discomfort, I realized I was watching someone's actual home, accessed through their own security system, without their knowledge. The viewers weren't just passive observers. They were actively discussing how to enter this residence. This wasn't entertainment, it was premeditation. At 1:17 a.m., a third camera angle activated, showing the exterior of the house, specifically the back door and patio area. A figure in dark clothing appeared at the edge of the frame, moving carefully toward the door. Messages from viewers increased rapidly, many sending specific instructions about the lock mechanism, based on what they could see in the high-definition footage. I was witnessing the planning and execution of a home invasion being live-streamed to paying viewers who were actively participating in the process. This went far beyond insurance fraud or staged robberies. This was real, happening in real time, to an unsuspecting victim. I frantically tried to identify the location, searching for any distinguishing features in the footage. Street signs through windows, mail with an address, anything that could help me alert authorities. But the camera angles were carefully chosen to avoid revealing identifying details. The only geographic clue was a weather alert visible on a phone screen on the nightstand, suggesting a location somewhere in the Pacific Northwest. As the figure began working on the back door lock, I made a decision. I had to report this immediately, even if it meant admitting I had accessed the platform without authorization. I disconnected from the stream and called the FBI's cyber division. Using an anonymous reporting system, I provided everything I had: the network pathways, access methods, descriptions of what I'd witnessed, and the connection to our insurance fraud case. The next morning, I arrived at work to find 2 federal agents waiting in our company's security office. For 3 hours, they questioned me about how I had discovered the streaming platform, what I had observed, and whether I had participated in any way beyond viewing. They seemed less interested in the home invasion I had reported, and more focused on the broader network infrastructure. They took custody of all my research materials and requested I not discuss the matter with anyone else while their investigation proceeded. That evening, I searched news sources for any reports of a home invasion in the Pacific Northwest. Nothing appeared that matched what I had witnessed. Either it hadn't made the news, hadn't actually occurred, or it happened somewhere entirely different than I had assumed. 2 days later, I received an email from an address consisting only of numbers. The subject line read, "Viewer Analytics Report." The message contained a single line of text: "Your observation patterns have been flagged for review." Attached was a detailed file analyzing my viewing behavior during the brief time I had accessed the platform. How long I had watched each camera angle, which parts of the frame my cursor had hovered over, timestamps of when I had been active versus idle. It concluded with an assessment that I displayed intervention probability indicators that made me an unsuitable viewing participant. The precision of this analysis was chilling. Whatever system they were using could track not just that I had viewed the stream, but exactly how I had engaged with it right down to my mouse movements and hesitations. They knew I wasn't a genuine customer. They knew I was likely to report what I had seen. I changed all my passwords, reformatted my work computer, and swept my home for surveillance devices. I found nothing unusual, but the feeling of being monitored persisted. A week passed without incident. The federal agents didn't contact me again. The anonymous email address sent nothing further. Our fraud investigation proceeded without any mention of what I had discovered. I began to wonder if I had overreacted. Perhaps the streaming platform was actually some elaborate role-playing game where participants pretended to plan crimes. Perhaps the home and its sleeping occupant were staged setups with paid actors, like the electronics store robbery. Such an explanation wouldn't make it legal, but it would at least be less immediately dangerous. Then the photographs arrived. Standard 4x6 prints in a plain white envelope, no return address, delivered to my apartment mailbox. 5 photos in total. The first showed me entering my workplace, taken from what appeared to be a security camera across the street. The second showed me at a coffee shop I frequented, captured from the shop's own surveillance system. The third was me getting into my car in a grocery store parking lot. The fourth showed the exterior of my apartment building. The fifth photo showed me asleep in my bed, taken from an angle high in the corner of my bedroom. I have no security cameras in my apartment. No webcams positioned where that photo could have been taken. No devices with cameras directed toward my bed. Yet there it was, proof that someone had been watching me sleep, just as I had watched a stranger sleep through that live stream. I went to the police, showed them the photos, explained the situation. They took a report, checked my apartment for signs of breaking and entering, found nothing disturbed. No evidence of how the bedroom photo had been taken. They suggested installing better locks, getting a security system, being more aware of my surroundings. Standard advice that completely missed the point of what was happening. Over the next few weeks, more envelopes arrived. Each contained a single photo showing me in situations where I believed I was unobserved. Reading on my balcony, showering, captured from outside the bathroom window. Working late at my desk. Each photo had a timestamp and a viewership count printed in the bottom corner. Apparently, 16 people had watched me shower. 23 had observed me sleeping. 31 had seen me working at my desk. I moved to a different apartment, changed jobs, altered my appearance, and adjusted my routine. The photos kept coming, now delivered to my new address. Sometimes they would arrive within hours of being taken, proving they weren't the result of long-term surveillance, but active, ongoing observation. The most recent envelope arrived yesterday. Instead of photographs, it contained a small card with a printed message. Home Evaluation Series, Residence 43, scheduled for 1 a.m. Estimated viewers, 58 primary subject. U interaction parameters extended. Below this was a link to the streaming platform I had discovered months ago. I'm not going to be in my apartment at 1 a.m. tonight. I won't be anywhere they can easily find me. I've disabled or disposed of anything that could potentially be used to track my location. This message was typed on a public computer, and I'll be somewhere else entirely by the time anyone reads it. I still don't fully understand what I've stumbled into. Some kind of voyeuristic network that repurposes security systems for entertainment. A criminal organization that combines surveillance with burglary and fraud. Something with even darker purposes that I haven't yet discerned. What I do know is that in this system, the distinction between observer and observed is fluid. Today's viewer becomes tomorrow's unwitting performer. The cameras that make us feel secure are the same ones that make us vulnerable. And somewhere out there right now, someone is watching footage of ordinary people in supposedly private moments, never realizing that they themselves are being watched through the very screen they're using to observe others. The most disturbing part isn't that I'm being monitored. It's the realization that I probably always was. The platform I discovered didn't create this surveillance network. It merely monetized what already existed. Our world is saturated with cameras we've willingly installed, with devices that listen and watch, with systems designed to track our movements and behaviors. We've built our own panopticon and called it convenience, called it security, called it connection. I don't know who will be watching at 1 a.m. tonight. I don't know what extended interaction parameters means in this context, but I do know that whatever happens, it will be recorded, categorized, and stored for future viewers. Another node in an ever-expanding network of observed moments. And somewhere in that database is footage of me watching someone else, unaware that I was already part of the performance. I never thought I'd be the type of person to get mixed up in something like this. Most people wouldn't. That's the thing about curiosity. It starts innocently enough. A random link shared in a forum. A passing comment about the dark web that piques your interest. For me, it began with an article I read about internet privacy and security. The author mentioned Tor browsers and onion routing almost as an afterthought. I didn't even know what those things were at the time. I'm a network engineer by trade. My days revolve around making sure corporate systems stay operational, patching vulnerabilities, monitoring traffic patterns. Nothing extraordinary. Just another tech guy with a modest apartment, a decent salary, and too much free time on his hands. Maybe that's why I installed the Tor browser that night. Professional development, I told myself. Good to understand how these things work. The first few days exploring the dark web were disappointingly mundane. Forums discussing privacy rights, marketplaces selling things I had no interest in, dead links, slow loading times. It was like visiting the internet of the early 2000s, minus the charm. I was about to uninstall the whole thing when I stumbled across a thread discussing something called red rooms. The concept seemed absurd at first. Live streaming platforms where viewers could watch and even direct acts of violence against unwilling participants. Urban legends, I thought. Internet boogeyman stories to scare the uninitiated. Most people in the thread seemed to agree. They were myths, impossible to operate given bandwidth limitations and the technical difficulties of secure streaming. A few individuals insisted they existed, but provided no evidence, no links. Then someone posted coordinates. Not a web address, but a string of characters, numbers, and symbols that meant nothing to me. Someone else responded with a single word. The thread went quiet after that. I copied the string. I shouldn't have done that. Everything would be different if I had just closed the browser right then. It took me 3 days to figure out what to do with those characters. The solution came from an obscure subforum where users discuss cryptographic methods. The string was a key of sorts, one that had to be entered into a specific field on a specific site at a specific time. The kind of complexity that made me think there really was something to hide. I found the site. A blank page with a single input field. Nothing to indicate what it was for. No text, no images. Just an empty box waiting to be filled. I hesitated before pasting in the string. This was the moment I should have walked away. Something about the sterility of that page felt wrong in a way I couldn't articulate. The cursor blinked rhythmically in the empty field. patient, expectant, waiting for me to make a mistake I couldn't undo. The first sign that I had done something irreversible was the sudden change in my network traffic. I monitor my home network obsessively. Occupational habit. The data pattern shifted, connections multiplying through nodes I couldn't identify. This wasn't normal Tor behavior. My system was being mapped, examined, catalogued by something on the other end. Each packet of data felt like fingers probing through my digital walls, searching for weaknesses, memorizing the layout of my network, of my life. Then the page changed. A loading icon, a countdown timer set to 20 minutes. Nothing else. I waited, telling myself I could close the browser at any time. I didn't. The seconds ticked away, each one dragging longer than the last. My mouth went dry, sweat beaded along my hairline. Still, I waited. Some terrible gravity held me there, unable or unwilling to turn away from what was coming. When the timer reached 0, the stream began. The video quality was surprisingly good. High definition, minimal latency. The room shown was simple. White walls, concrete floor with a drain in the center. A single chair bolted to the floor, empty, waiting. The emptiness of that room hummed with potential violence. The drain in the floor promised the necessity of easy cleaning. The bolted chair spoke of resistance that needed to be overcome. A chat window appeared beside the video feed. Users with alphanumeric names filled the space with scrolling text. I didn't participate, just watched the conversations scroll by. They discussed preferences, made requests. Some offered payment in cryptocurrency. Others seemed to have credit of some kind already established. The casual nature of their communications made my skin crawl. The banality of their anticipation, the everyday commerce of atrocity. I should have left then, but a terrible curiosity kept me watching. In my defense, part of me still believed this was elaborate theater. Dark web performance art designed to shock and disturb. It couldn't be real. The alternative was too monstrous to contemplate. A door opened somewhere off camera. A figure entered the frame, face obscured by a featureless white mask. They wore simple clothes, black pants, grey shirt, latex gloves. Nothing remarkable or identifiable. They looked directly at the camera and held up a piece of paper with a string of characters, a verification code of some kind. Proof that this was happening now, not pre-recorded. The blank mask stared into the camera, into my eyes, as if the person behind it could see me watching, could identify me through the screen. The chat erupted with activity. The masked figure put the paper down and left the frame briefly, returning with someone else. A person with a hood over their head, hands bound behind their back. They were guided to the chair, secured with restraints at the ankles, wrists, and across the torso. The hood remained. The chat began specifying activities. I won't detail what was requested. I won't detail what happened next. I closed the stream after 3 minutes and 17 seconds. Not nearly fast enough. I uninstalled Tor, ran security sweeps on my system, and tried to convince myself I had witnessed an elaborate hoax. But the sound stayed with me, the movements, the knowledge that somewhere, in some hidden corner of the world, that room existed, that chair, that drain. 3 days later, I noticed something unusual about my home network. New devices connecting briefly, then disappearing. Strange traffic patterns in the early morning hours, when I should have been the only one active. Someone had compromised my security. Someone had access. The intrusion felt intimate, violating in ways I couldn't fully process. My private space, my data, my life, all exposed to unknown observers. I changed all my passwords. reconfigured my router, installed new firewalls. The intrusions continued, more sophisticated now, avoiding the measures I put in place. Whoever it was had considerable skill, or resources, or both. Each time I implemented a new security measure, they adapted, evolved, found new pathways into my systems. It became a game of chess where I could only see my own pieces, never my opponent's. A week after viewing the stream, I received an email from an address consisting of random characters. The subject line was the same verification code I had seen on the piece of paper in the video. The body of the email contained a single line about viewers becoming participants eventually. I deleted the email, reported it as phishing, told myself it was automated, sent to everyone who had accessed the stream. Nothing personal, nothing targeted. But my hands shook as I clicked the delete button. My breath came in short, shallow gasps. I knew. Some part of me already knew. Then the real messages started arriving. Direct messages to accounts I hadn't shared with anyone. My private phone number, my work email. All with the same theme. They knew who I was. They knew where I lived. They knew my routines. Each message included proof. A photo of my apartment building taken that day, a screenshot of my calendar, a list of my recent purchases. The level of detail grew more invasive with each communication. What I ate for breakfast, which route I took to work, how long I spent in the shower. The final message came with an attachment, a floor plan of my apartment with an X marked beside my bed. The message informed me that my stream would begin soon, and participants were already bidding. The clinical precision of the threat made it worse somehow. No emotion, no sadness, just process, procedure, industry. I went to the police, tried to explain without incriminating myself. They took notes, offered to send a patrol car by my building, suggested I was being targeted by standard identity thieves. They didn't understand, couldn't understand without seeing what I had seen. The bored expressions on their faces as I tried to convey the danger made me realize how alone I truly was. I stayed in a hotel that night, paid in cash, used a fake name, didn't bring any devices with me, just sat in the room with the chain on the door, watching the parking lot through a gap in the curtains. Nothing happened. No one came. Hours stretched into eternity as I waited for a threat that never materialized. Sleep came in brief, restless intervals, interrupted by the slightest sounds from neighboring rooms or the hallway outside. I returned home the next day, convinced I had overreacted. The apartment was exactly as I had left it. No signs of entry, no disturbance. I ran more security scans, changed the locks, installed a camera system. Life began to feel normal again as days passed without incident, but the normalcy felt thin, fragile, like ice forming over a dark lake. I went through the motions of my routine while constantly looking over my shoulder, checking reflections in windows, scanning crowds for watching eyes. 2 weeks later, as I was falling asleep, I heard a notification sound from my phone. A new email, the verification code as the subject line again. The body contained a link and words about my viewership making something possible. I didn't click the link, deleted the email immediately, blocked the sender, tried to go back to sleep. The darkness of my bedroom seemed deeper somehow, the shadows more substantial. My heartbeat echoed in my ears, too loud, too fast. Sleep retreated beyond my reach. That's when I heard the knock at my door. Not a pounding or frantic banging, just 3 measured, deliberate knocks. Professional, patient. The sound cut through the silence of my apartment with surgical precision. My entire body went rigid, paralyzed by the confirmation of my worst fears. I checked the camera feed on on my phone. No one appeared on the screen, just an empty hallway. The emptiness seemed wrong somehow, unnatural, as if the space itself had been hollowed out. Reality thinned to allow something through. Another knock, same pattern, same deliberate pacing. The sound seemed to reverberate through my bones, setting my teeth on edge. The empty hallway on my phone screen made no sense. The knocking made no sense. Nothing made sense anymore. I called the police, whispering my address, explaining there was someone at my door. They promised to send someone, asked if I could stay on the line. I agreed, keeping my voice low. The dispatcher's voice in my ear provided a tenuous connection to normality, to safety. I clung to it even as another set of knocks came. The knocking came a third time. I moved as quietly as I could to the door, looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty, not just unoccupied, but empty in a way that defied explanation. The familiar corridor seemed distorted, stretched, as if viewed through warped glass. And still, no one visible who could be causing the sound. A fourth knock, right in front of me. Impossible, with no one there. The sound now originating centimeters from my face. I could feel the vibration of it through the door, against my forehead pressed to the peephole. A knock from nothing, from nowhere, from no one. I backed away from the door, explained to the dispatcher what was happening. They asked me to verify my address again, told me units were 3 minutes away. Their voice sounded distant now, underwater, unreachable. The connection failing as reality unraveled around me. The knocking stopped. My phone chimed with a new notification. A text message from my own number informing me they were already inside. The words glowed on the screen. Impossible, yet undeniable. The air in the apartment changed, grew heavier, charged with presence. No longer alone, no longer safe, never safe again. The police arrived 8 minutes later. They found the door locked, chained from the inside. When no one answered their knocks, they broke the door down. The apartment was empty, no signs of struggle, no evidence anyone had been there besides me. Just my phone on the floor, screen shattered, and a piece of paper beside it with that same verification code. The police report noted nothing unusual beyond an abandoned residence, a missing person case with no leads, no witnesses, no evidence of foul play. Just another digital ghost, forgotten as screens scroll to the next distraction. I'm told they're still looking for me, friends, family, co-workers. They've all received messages from my accounts saying I needed some time away, that I'd be back soon. The messages include details only I would know, use phrases and expressions specific to me. Perfect digital forgeries maintaining the illusion that I still exist in the world I once knew. They aren't from me. I don't know where I am. The room has white walls, concrete floor with a drain in the center, a single chair that I'm secured to. There's a camera mounted in the corner, its red light constantly on, watching, streaming. The light never blinks, never wavers. A mechanical eye broadcasting my existence to unseen watchers. Sometimes I hear notifications through the walls. Sounds like bids being placed. Sounds like viewers making requests. The same commerce I once witnessed now cycles back to me. The drain in the floor waits patiently. The restraints hold firm. The door remains closed but will open soon. I know what's coming. I've seen this stream before. The other side of the screen now. The other side of the mask. Participant, no longer viewer. If you're reading this, it's because someone wants my story shared. A warning, perhaps. Or an advertisement. The truth doesn't matter anymore. Only the stream matters. Only the viewers matter. Be careful what you look for online. Be careful what you allow yourself to witness. The line between viewer and participant is thinner than you think. A membrane easily punctured, a boundary easily crossed. And if you hear that measured knock at your door someday, don't answer. I used to think some people just changed, that it was a normal part of growing up. People drift, get bitter, harden. That was how I explained what happened to her for a long time. I told myself she just became someone else, that it wasn't personal. It took me years to admit it wasn't normal at all. Her name was Ava. We were best friends growing up, same street, same school, same everything. There wasn't a single sleepover or birthday party where she wasn't there. For years, we were like our own little orbit. She was smart and weird in a good way. The kind of kid who made up stories during lunch and drew creepy comics in the margins of her notebooks. I liked that about her. She made boring things feel alive. Then she disappeared. It was the summer after graduation. No big send-off. No party. One day she was there, the next she wasn't. Her aunt posted some photo on Facebook of Ava in Italy or Greece, some old town with narrow stone streets. I hadn't even known she was leaving. I messaged her more than once. No replies. Eventually, I stopped, not because I was mad, but because I didn't want to feel like I was bothering her. I figured maybe she needed space or just wanted a fresh start. She came back 2 years later. It wasn't announced. There was no big reunion. I just ran into her at a petrol station of all places. I remember how weirdly bright it was inside, the way bad fluorescent lighting always is. I saw her before she saw me. And even though her face hadn't changed much, I felt something tighten in my chest. Her eyes weren't the same. It wasn't anything like you see in some movies, where they can literally see darkness or whatever. But the way she looked at me, it was like I was an inconvenience, like she'd already moved on and was annoyed I hadn't. She didn't hug me, didn't smile, just gave me a flat hey and grabbed her receipt. I stood there like an idiot holding a Fanta. I didn't even say much, just something like, "You're back." And she nodded and walked out. That was it. I tried to reach out again, occasionally texting her. I got nothing back. I ran into her once more at a grocery store. Same deal, cold, flat, not mean, just completely uninterested. After a while, I gave up, and I told myself maybe that was fine. Maybe people don't always owe you an explanation for who they become. But part of me kept replaying that first moment in the gas station, the way she looked through me. That brings me to last year. It was a Saturday night, early fall. I was home alone, half watching a YouTube documentary with the volume low. My phone was face down. I remember the exact buzz it made, that long one. The kind you get with messages from people not in your contacts. I don't know why I even checked it. It was from Ava, or at least from her number. There wasn't a message, just a link, no context, no greeting. Just a string of random characters and a .onion address buried in the middle. I stared at it for probably a full minute. I didn't even breathe. My first thought was that it was a scam or malware. But some part of me, the old part that still remembered how close we were, told me she sent it on purpose, that there was a reason. I used an old laptop, booted it into Tails. I'd played with Tor before years ago, but never for anything like this. My hands were clammy the whole time. I told myself if anything looked shady, I'd kill the power immediately. The page took almost a full minute to load. When it finally did, it was just a black screen with a timer. 0248, just under 3 minutes. It counted down in red, and underneath it was a chat box already going. Lines of text, constant, some of it in languages I couldn't read. The rest was English, but coded, like slang or shorthand. I couldn't tell what they were talking about at first. When the timer hit 0, the stream flickered on. There was a chair in the middle of a concrete room. It was bolted to the floor, but empty. The room was completely empty, as far as I could see, with no windows. Just the hum of overhead lights and the faint echo of someone walking, somewhere off camera. I still didn't understand what I was looking at. Then the chat changed. People were typing numbers, making bids. Usernames I didn't recognize were posting names. Some were fake, some felt too real. One of them was next pick, pulled from chat. That's when I felt my stomach turn. I scrolled up to try and make sense of it, and that's when I saw her, Avenue, or what had to be her. Not her real name, but an old handle she used in middle school. I hadn't seen it in years. No one else could have remembered that. She was active, posting, typing like she belonged there. Then I saw it. Bid. £9,400. Then my name. M. Full name. Spelled correctly, properly capitalized, just sitting there like any other text. I froze. For a few seconds, I couldn't even move, couldn't even close the tab. I just sat there watching more usernames chime in. Seconded, confirmed, show us the face. I slammed the laptop shut, unplugged it. Yanked the battery like that would somehow protect me. My ears were ringing. It was like that high-pitched tone you get when your body goes into survival mode. I don't remember standing up. I just remember pacing, hands shaking, heart doing this sick little flutter in my chest. I didn't sleep that night. Next morning, I had 3 missed calls from numbers I didn't know. 1 voicemail. It was 10 seconds of silence, then the sound of something scraping across concrete. That same sound from the stream. I threw the phone out, got a new number. Emails came next. One-liners, things like, "We'll find you," or "Don't bother running." They were always from different addresses, always with some little detail to let me know it was personal. I deleted everything and removed all of my private info off social media. I did my best to erase any trace of myself online, but the more I scrubbed, the more I realized how much of me was still floating out there. Then came the people. At first, I convinced myself it was just paranoia. I would walk to the store and feel the weight of someone behind me. I would glance out the window and see a car idling across the street, longer than made sense for someone doing nothing. But the patterns kept repeating. It was the same car, the same face. Not every day, but often enough to notice. Different angles, different times, always nearby, always lingering just long enough to register, but never long enough to confront. Eventually, I filed a police report. It was a waste of time. There were no direct threats, no evidence. They told me to block the emails and vary my daily routines. I had already done that. So I left. I moved to a different city. I changed my name. I found a place to rent off the books and stayed disconnected. I deleted every trace of myself online, and I stopped using any account tied to my real identity. For a while, I believed I was safe. That changed last week. Someone slid an envelope under my apartment door. Inside was a single photograph. It was a picture of me walking home taken from behind. The framing was deliberate. The image was clear. It was taken recently, close and carefully. There was no note, no sender, no explanation, only the photograph. Now I am packing again. Because wherever Ava is, whatever she has become, she saw me. And this time, she chose me. I was the one who found the website. That's the part I can't forget, no matter how hard I try. A few years later, and I still wake up in cold sweats thinking about that night in the hostel and how everything changed when Emily started screaming. I've never spoken about this to anyone, not even to the friends who were there that night. I'm writing this down because keeping it bottled up is slowly destroying me. My girlfriend says I talk in my sleep, muttering about turning it off and just a video. She thinks it's from stress at work, but how do I tell her what we all saw that night? How do I explain that somewhere out there, those videos are still being made, still being watched, and we all just walked away and pretended it never happened? This happened during my gap year after sixth form. I'd been backpacking around Eastern Europe with money I'd saved from working at my local supermarket for 18 months. By October, I'd made my way to Prague, staying in this massive hostel that was popular with British and American backpackers. It was the kind of place where you could always find someone to go drinking with, where people passed through for a few days before moving on to Berlin or Vienna or Budapest. I'd been there about 4 days when I met this group of British students, 2 guys and 3 girls, all from different universities who'd met while traveling. They seemed cool, and we clicked right away over cheap beers in the hostel's common room. They were like most backpackers you meet, open-minded, adventurous, looking for experiences they could tell stories about when they got home. Stories that would make their friends envious of their gap year adventures. On my 5th night, after the hostel bar closed at midnight, we were all a bit drunk, but not ready to sleep. One of the guys, Tom, suggested we go back to their room to keep drinking. They had a 6-bed dorm all to themselves, so there was plenty of space. I remember thinking it was just going to be another night of swapping travel stories and maybe planning a group outing for the next day. The hostel was one of those converted old buildings with thick walls and creaky wooden floors. Their room was on the 3rd floor, at the end of a long hallway lit by these dim yellow lights that made everything look slightly jaundiced. When we got to their room, Tom pulled out his laptop and a bottle of local vodka someone had bought earlier. I should mention that at this point, I still thought this was going to be a normal night. Maybe watch some YouTube videos, share music, typical backpacker bonding stuff. I had no idea Tom was into the dark web, or that he'd been showing the others crazy videos he found there over the past few nights. While Tom set up his laptop, connecting to the hostel Wi-Fi through some VPN he was using, he started telling me about these insane gore videos he'd found. He explained how you needed special browsers to access these sites, how everything was anonymous, how you could find anything if you knew where to look. I remember feeling uncomfortable, but also curious. I'd heard about the dark web before, but had never seen it. The others were clearly already familiar with this routine. They arranged themselves on the bunk beds around Tom's laptop, passing around the vodka bottle. The room was dimly lit, just one small bedside lamp on, which made the laptop screen seem extraordinarily bright. I sat on one of the lower bunks, feeling increasingly uneasy, but not wanting to seem like the prudish one of the group. Tom navigated through what looked like a normal forum, except everything was styled in black and red. The site had a name that was just a string of random letters and numbers. He explained they curated the best extreme videos from around the web. I remember how casually he scrolled through thumbnail images that already looked disturbing, even at that small size. Emily sat beside me on the bunk, while Sophie and Anna were on the opposite bunk. The other guy, Dave, was sitting on the floor next to Tom. There was this weird energy in the room, a mix of nervous excitement and discomfort. Nobody wanted to be the one to say this was too much. Tom clicked on a video titled something like Workshop Fun. The player expanded to fill most of the screen. What we saw started like some kind of amateur horror film. Poor lighting, shaky camera work. Someone in what looked like a workshop or garage. There was a person tied to a chair, wearing what appeared to be a bloody Halloween mask. At least, that's what I told myself it was. The camera moved around this person, showing various tools laid out on a table nearby. Everything looked staged, but in a disturbing way that was trying too hard to be shocking. Tom and Dave were making comments about the fake blood and how you could see the strings when the camera zoomed in. I wanted to believe them, that this was just some extreme version of those fake prank videos you sometimes stumble across online. But then the camera angle changed, and we could see the person's face clearly for the first time. The Halloween mask wasn't a mask at all. It was a real person, gagged and terrified, with what looked like cuts and burns already visible on their face and neck. That's when Emily made this strangled sound next to me. At first, I thought she was just reacting to how graphic the video was turning. We all felt sick watching it. But then she grabbed Tom's arm so hard he spilled vodka on himself. She kept pointing at the screen, not speaking, just making these awful, choked sounds. Tom paused the video, annoyed at first. Emily was shaking, tears streaming down her face as she tried to form words. Finally, she managed to tell us that she recognized the person in the video. It was someone from her hometown, a girl who had gone missing during a backpacking trip through Eastern Europe almost 6 months earlier. The room went completely silent. Tom immediately closed the laptop, but it was too late. We'd all seen it. We'd all recognized the moment Emily had. This wasn't some fake gore video made for shock value. This was real footage of a real person who had really gone missing. What followed was chaos. Sophie started crying. Dave was saying it couldn't be the same person, that Emily was mistaken. Anna was frantically texting someone on her phone. Tom just sat there staring at his closed laptop like it might explode. I felt physically sick, like the floor was tilting beneath me. My mind kept replaying that moment when I realized we weren't watching a sick prank or an amateur horror film. We were watching someone's actual suffering, someone Emily knew personally. And the timestamp on the video was from 3 months ago. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, Tom reopened his laptop. Instead of going back to the video, he started deleting his browsing history, clearing caches, removing whatever software he'd been using. His hands were shaking so badly he kept mistyping. Dave was helping him, both of them muttering about IP addresses and how we could all get in trouble for accessing the site. Emily wanted to go to the police, but Tom and Dave were adamant that we couldn't. They argued that we'd be implicated for accessing the dark web, that we could be considered suspects since we'd clearly been looking for violent content. Sophie sided with them, terrified of getting in trouble. Anna just kept saying we should leave Prague immediately. I just sat there, paralyzed with indecision. Part of me knew Emily was right. We had to report what we'd seen, but another part was selfishly worried about the consequences. Would I be detained in a foreign country? Would this follow me forever? Would my parents find out I'd been watching disgusting videos on the dark web? In the end, we made a decision that haunts me every day. We agreed to say nothing. Tom completely wiped his laptop, even running some program that supposedly overwrote the hard drive multiple times. We all swore to never speak of it again. The next morning, the group checked out of the hostel. I stayed another day, unable to face them at breakfast. Emily had been crying all night. I could hear her through the walls. When I finally left Prague, I went south instead of east as I'd planned, wanting to put as much distance between myself and the memory of that night as possible. But here's the thing I can't stop thinking about. Someone is making those videos. Someone is filming them. Someone is uploading them, and people like us are watching them, telling themselves it's not real, that it's just extreme entertainment. Until that night, I could pretend the dark web was just an urban legend, a story about a hidden part of the internet where terrible things happen. But I've seen it now. I've seen how thin the line is between curiosity and complicity. I've seen how easy it is to become part of something horrific without even realizing it until it's too late. Sometimes I look up the case of the missing girl from Emily's hometown. There's still a Facebook page dedicated to finding her, run by her parents. They post updates on the anniversary of her disappearance, begging for information. They don't know what happened to their daughter. They don't know that 7 strangers in a Prague hostel saw her final moments and said nothing. I don't know what happened to the others after that night. We disconnected completely. No social media, no exchange numbers. It was like we all wanted to erase each other along with the memory. But I wonder if they have the same nightmares I do. I wonder if Emily ever went to the police on her own. I wonder if Tom still browses those sites, telling himself it's all fake. And I wonder about something else, something that keeps me awake at night. When Tom was scrolling through that site, I saw dozens of thumbnail images of other videos, dozens of other victims. How many of them were real people with families searching for them? How many disappeared without a trace, only to end up as entertainment for people like us, drinking in hostels and looking for a thrill? I still travel sometimes, but I never stay in hostels. I can't stand the thought of those communal spaces, those rooms full of strangers, all with their own secrets and browsing histories. Every time I see someone hunched over a laptop with their screen angled away, I wonder what they're watching. Every time I hear about a missing backpacker, I think about that night. The dark web isn't some separate world that exists apart from ours. It's here, bleeding into our reality every day. People disappear, videos appear. And somewhere in Prague, in a hostel room that's been cleaned and rented thousands of times since that night, 7 people became part of something they can never undo, no matter how hard they try to delete it. The endless horizon of the Scottish Highlands still haunts me, not for its beauty, but for how effectively it isolated us from everything I once took for granted. Safety, connection, witnesses. I find myself tensing whenever I see a camper van now, my heart rate accelerating at the distinctive shape of an RV against the skyline. These normal vehicles, symbols of freedom and adventure for most, represent something entirely different in my fractured memory. Mobile prisons moving between remote locations, carrying occupants who had no idea they were being filmed for their final moments as dark web entertainment. Before that week in May, I was just another burnt-out university graduate with a photography degree and mounting debt, bouncing between freelance gigs, while my more successful classmates secured gallery showings in stable positions. My portfolio was technically sound, but lacked what one particularly blunt interviewer called authentic emotional content, the kind that comes from genuine human connection rather than staged compositions. When I stumbled across a posting on a photography forum seeking someone to document a Highland road trip for a travel blog, the opportunity seemed almost too perfect. 2 weeks of accommodations and meals covered, plus a modest day rate, and the chance to build my portfolio with breathtaking landscapes. The 3 people who picked me up outside Inverness station didn't immediately trigger any internal alarms. Marcus, the apparent leader, was a charismatic American in his 30s, with an easy smile and impressive knowledge of high-end camera equipment. Sasha, a quiet woman with a Scandinavian accent who handled most of the driving, kept her interactions brief but professional. Then there was Eli, younger than the others, constantly fidgeting with various devices, phones, tablets, a sophisticated laptop setup, who explained his role as handling their social media presence and technical needs. The camper van itself was surprisingly luxurious, a large, well-appointed vehicle with distinct living and sleeping areas, modern appliances, and what I initially registered as impressively comprehensive camera equipment for a travel blog. Looking back, I should have questioned why a simple travel documentary required multiple hidden cameras, encrypted hard drives, and satellite uplink capability disguised as standard communication equipment. I mistook these red flags for signs of professionalism, of serious content creators investing in quality production. The truth was far darker. They had created a mobile studio designed for filming isolated locations while broadcasting to paying audiences hidden in obscure corners of the internet. Our first 3 days followed a seemingly legitimate pattern. We visited spectacular viewpoints along the North Coast 500 route, capturing footage of ancient castles and dramatic cliffs. I handled most of the still photography, while Marcus directed video sequences that seemed, at the time, like standard travel content. The only odd element was their insistence on incorporating hitchhikers or solo travelers we encountered into our footage. They were particularly interested in backpackers, young people traveling alone, often foreign visitors with limited connections in the country. Each evening, we would park in increasingly remote locations, far from official campsites or other travelers. Marcus explained this as seeking unspoiled shots, an authentic wilderness experience, which aligned with the blog's supposed focus on off-grid travel. During these nights, Eli would spend hours hunched over his equipment in what they called the editing bay, a partitioned section of the camper with multiple screens and a door that locked from the inside. I occasionally caught fragments of his communication that didn't quite fit our supposed project, references to subscribers, premium content, and special requests. The first truly unsettling incident occurred on our 4th night. We had picked up a backpacker earlier that day, a German student hiking through Scotland on his gap year. He seemed thrilled by the offer of a hot meal and lift to the next town. That evening, parked beside a remote loch with no other vehicles visible for miles, I woke to hushed movements and the distinct sound of a struggle coming from the main cabin area. Peering through a crack in my curtained sleeping compartment, I glimpsed Marcus and Sasha restraining the German traveler, while Eli adjusted camera angles and lighting with practiced efficiency. My immediate reaction was frozen disbelief. Surely this was some misunderstanding, perhaps an elaborate prank for their blog. I retreated into my bunk, heartbeat thundering in my ears, trying to rationalize what I'd seen. By morning, the backpacker was gone, with Marcus casually mentioning that he decided to continue his journey early. The easy way he maintained eye contact while delivering this obvious lie sent ice through my veins, but I nodded and forced a smile, suddenly aware of my own vulnerability in this isolated location with people who were clearly not who they claimed to be. That day, reviewing images on my camera, I noticed something I'd overlooked, a folder accidentally synced from Eli's computer to our shared cloud storage. Inside were thumbnails that made my blood run cold, night vision footage of previous guests in various stages of terror, file names containing phrases like unboxing, first cut, and finale. Most disturbing was a document listing dark web viewer statistics and cryptocurrency payments associated with each video, some figures reaching 5 and 6 digits for what were labeled interactive eliminations. The file structure used the same distinctive formatting I'd only read about in articles exposing dark web marketplaces and red rooms. The horrifying truth crystallized all at once. I wasn't documenting a travel blog. I was unknowingly participating in a dark web broadcast channel that streamed kidnapping, torture, and murder to paying viewers who could influence the proceedings through cryptocurrency donations and votes. The remote locations weren't for capturing unspoiled landscapes. They were chosen for isolation, for eliminating the possibility of intervention or witnesses. This was one of those infamous dark web red rooms I'd heard journalists reference with skepticism, operating right before my eyes. And I, with my legitimate photography credentials and the social media presence, provided the perfect cover for approaching victims and establishing trust. That night, parked in our most isolated location yet beside an abandoned quarry, I overheard them discussing their plans for me. I had served my purpose in helping secure victims and providing authentic-looking content for their cover story. Now, according to Marcus, I would make compelling final content for their premium subscribers. Eli mentioned special requests already coming in, viewers excited by the prospect of the documentarian becoming the documented. Sasha, in her clinical tone, suggested a multi-day experience to maximize revenue. My only chance was the brief window when they all left the camper to scout the location for optimal filming angles. With shaking hands, I searched frantically for anything I could use: cash, keys, a weapon for defense. What I found instead, hidden in a compartment beneath Eli's workstation, was a hard drive containing what appeared to be their complete broadcast history. Dozens of videos documenting what happened to the smiling, trusting travelers who had briefly appeared in our travel blog footage before disappearing. I grabbed the drive along with my own camera containing photographic evidence of locations and their faces, then slipped out through the emergency exit window. The Highland night was bitterly cold, the darkness nearly absolute away from the camper's lights. I oriented myself toward where I thought the nearest road might be, perhaps 5 miles across difficult terrain, and began moving as quietly as possible across the rocky landscape. I hadn't gone more than 100 yards when the camper's exterior lights suddenly flooded the area with harsh illumination. A notification tone had betrayed me. My phone, which I'd forgotten to silence, receiving a message from a friend checking why I hadn't posted on social media recently. The familiar ping echoed across the quarry like a death knell, immediately followed by shouts from Marcus, directing the others to different search quadrants. What followed was a nightmarish game of cat and mouse across terrain I was ill-equipped to navigate. I could hear them methodically sweeping the area, Eli providing updates through their communication system, Marcus occasionally calling out with false promises of safety if I returned willingly. Most chilling was Sasha's complete silence, professional, efficient, tracking me with the focus of someone who had done this many times before. I eventually found shelter in a narrow crevice between boulders, pressing myself into the damp darkness as their flashlight beams swept nearby. Hours passed, the cold seeping into my bones, before the first hints of dawn provided enough light to navigate. I emerged cautiously, limbs stiff and painful, to discover the camper still parked in the distance, but no sign of my pursuers. The road, when I finally reached it, was deserted at that early hour. I walked for nearly 3 hours before a delivery van stopped. The driver's initial wariness turning to concern at my disheveled state and obviously distressed condition. He drove me to the nearest police station in Ullapool, maintaining a respectful silence that I now recognize as the reaction of someone who senses they've encountered something traumatic. and doesn't want to cause further harm through questioning. The police response was initially skeptical. My story sounded fantastical, especially without immediately available evidence. The hard drive I'd stolen was encrypted in ways beyond their immediate technical capabilities. It took the discovery of blood evidence in a location I'd photographed, matched to a missing Portuguese tourist reported 3 days earlier, for the investigation to gain momentum. By then, the camper and its occupants had vanished, likely across the border or out of the country entirely. 6 months later, international law enforcement identified Marcus and Eli operating a similar scheme in rural New Zealand, targeting hikers on remote trails. They were arrested during an attempted abduction, their equipment confiscated, the full horror of their dark web operation exposed. The investigation uncovered a complex network of Tor hidden services, cryptocurrency wallets, and subscriber lists spanning 5 continents. Sasha remains at large, her true identity still unknown despite multiple aliases documented across several countries and dark web marketplaces. The videos continue to circulate on the dark web, I'm told, pass between private servers and encrypted channels beyond the reach of conventional detection. Sometimes I wonder if the people who watched those broadcasts, who paid to vote on what happened to those travelers, who treated human suffering as interactive entertainment, ever reflect on their role in creating the demand that these monsters supplied. I wonder how many well-appointed camper vans are traveling remote roads right now, their occupants unaware that their journey is being broadcast to unseen audiences eagerly awaiting the moment when the friendly hosts reveal their true purpose. I no longer take photographs. I no longer travel to isolated locations. I no longer trust offers that seem too perfectly aligned with my needs. Most of all, I never forget that the real horrors in this world aren't supernatural monsters or fictional killers. They're the ordinary-looking people who see others not as human beings, but as content to be consumed, their suffering translated into engagement metrics and cryptocurrency transactions somewhere in the darkest corners of the dark web. That shadowy underbelly of the internet continues to host these broadcasts, with new RVs and new victims, while most people remain blissfully unaware of what truly lurks beneath the surface of their everyday online experience. People always ask how someone like me ended up in this situation. I suppose it's fair to wonder how a university cleaner from Brighton could stumble onto something so dark that thousands of people are now eagerly waiting to watch me suffer. The answer is embarrassingly simple. I thought I was being helpful. It was about 4 months ago when I first heard about live streaming. My daughter had moved to Leeds for university, and we'd been struggling to stay in touch. She suggested we try some new platform where she could show me around her campus and I could give her virtual tours of home. I'm not great with technology, but I wanted to connect with her, so I signed up. The platform was called Streamlink, and it seemed straightforward enough. You could broadcast live to friends and family, or watch other people's streams if they made them public. I spent my first few weeks just watching travel vlogs and people cooking meals in their kitchens. Harmless stuff, the kind of content that made the internet feel like a friendlier place. I work night shifts, cleaning office buildings around Brighton. It's solitary work, which suits me fine, but it does get lonely sometimes. During my breaks, I'd watch these streams on my phone. People chatting while they worked, students showing their daily routines, families having dinner together. It felt like having company during the long, quiet hours. One night, I was cleaning a legal firm's offices when I received a notification that someone wanted to follow my account. The username was just a string of numbers and letters, but their profile showed they were interested in workplace environments. I accepted the follow request without thinking much about it. Probably someone else who worked night shifts, I figured. The next night, I got a message from the same account asking if I'd ever considered streaming during my work. They said they found workplace content relaxing and would be interested in watching someone clean offices. The message was polite, even complimentary about how peaceful night cleaning must be. They offered to pay me £20 per stream. £20 doesn't sound like much, but when you're on minimum wage and trying to help your daughter with university expenses, it's significant. I was hesitant at first. Streaming while working seemed unprofessional. But then I reasoned that I was only cleaning, and the buildings were empty anyway. What harm could there be? I started with short streams, maybe 30 minutes, while I cleaned reception areas or break rooms. My one regular viewer seemed genuinely interested, making comments about cleaning techniques and asking questions about different office layouts. They were respectful, never asking personal questions or trying to get me to show anything inappropriate. Just someone who found routine, methodical work soothing to watch. After a few weeks, they asked if I'd be willing to stream while cleaning higher security areas, places like server rooms or document storage. They offered £50 per stream and explained they worked in office security and were interested in how cleaning staff navigated around sensitive equipment. The request seemed reasonable, and the money was too good to refuse. That's when things started feeling off. During these streams, my viewer would make very specific comments about the equipment I was near, or ask me to clean certain areas more thoroughly. Once, they asked me to focus the camera on a particular server rack while I worked around it. Another time, they wanted me to spend extra time near a filing cabinet marked confidential. I started noticing other changes too. My viewer count occasionally showed 2 or 3 people watching instead of just one, though only my original follower ever commented. Sometimes I'd catch glimpses of unfamiliar usernames in the viewer list before they'd disappear. I told myself it was just a glitch in the platform. The requests grew more specific. Could I stream while cleaning the partners' offices? Could I make sure to clean around their desks thoroughly, showing any documents that might be left out? Could I adjust the camera angle to get a better view of computer screens that had been left on? Each request came with an increased payment offer. I should have stopped then. Should have realized what was really happening. But the money was too useful, and I convinced myself I wasn't doing anything truly wrong. I wasn't stealing documents or accessing computers. I was just cleaning, and if people wanted to watch me do my job, that was their choice. One night, about 6 weeks ago, everything changed. I was streaming while cleaning a law firm's conference room when I noticed something odd about the viewer count. Instead of the usual 2 or 3, it showed dozens of people watching, then hundreds, then thousands. The chat, which had always been just my one regular viewer making polite comments, exploded with activity. Messages were flying by too fast to read, but I caught fragments, coordinates, building layouts, security schedules. Someone was discussing the best times to enter the building. Another was sharing information about alarm systems. That's when I understood what my streams had really been used for. I wasn't providing relaxing content for lonely night shift workers. I was unknowingly conducting reconnaissance for criminals. Every office layout I'd shown, every security camera I'd inadvertently revealed, every keypad code I'd accidentally captured while unlocking doors, it had all been recorded and analyzed. I ended the stream immediately and tried to delete my account, but the platform wouldn't let me. Every time I attempted to log in, I received error messages When I tried to create a new account to see what was happening, I found that my streams had been archived and were still available to view. My cleaning routes through multiple office buildings had been documented in detail. 2 days later, I received an email to my personal account from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was just my full name. The body contained a single link and the words, "You've been very helpful. Now it's time to give back to the community." The link led to a different website, not Streamlink, but something darker. The page showed what appeared to be a live feed from an empty room. Concrete walls, industrial lighting, a drain in the floor. In the corner was a viewer counter that showed thousands of people watching. Below that was a countdown timer, set to 3 days from then. I closed the browser and tried to pretend I'd never seen it. But over the next day, I kept receiving messages, text messages to my phone, which I'd never given to anyone associated with the platform. Emails to addresses I'd only used for personal things. Social media accounts I thought were private suddenly had friend requests from users with random number usernames. The messages all carried the same theme. I'd provided valuable services, and now I needed to fulfill my part of a larger agreement, an agreement I'd never knowingly made. They referenced specific details from my streams, which office building I was in on, which nights, what time I usually took my breaks, even what I typically ate for my midnight meal. I went to the police, but explaining the situation made me sound paranoid or potentially complicit in whatever crimes were being planned. A middle-aged cleaner claiming he'd accidentally helped criminals through innocent live streams. They took a report, but clearly thought I was either confused or trying to cover up involvement in something illegal. That's when the physical surveillance began. People following me to work, cars parked outside my flat, strangers in the cleaning supply store who seemed to know my schedule. One morning, I came home to find my front door unlocked and a note on my kitchen table with just an address and the word tomorrow. The address was for a warehouse on the outskirts of Brighton. I didn't go, obviously. Instead, I packed what I could carry and left town. I've been moving from place to place since then, staying in different guest houses and hostels, paying cash for everything. But they keep finding me. Hotel staff who recognize me despite using different names. Other guests who seem to know my routines. Maintenance workers who ask unusual questions about the buildings I'm staying in. Sometimes I'll return to my room to find that someone has been through my belongings, though nothing is ever taken. Yesterday, I found a small package in my backpack that I definitely didn't put there. Inside was a mobile phone, already switched on. The screen showed a familiar interface, Streamlink, with a notification that I had thousands of followers waiting for my next broadcast. There was also a countdown timer, showing less than 2 days remaining. I'm writing this from an internet cafe in a town whose name I won't mention. The mobile phone is still with me because I'm afraid to throw it away. Every time I look at it, the follower count has increased. The comments section is active with messages I can't understand, references to locations, schedules, preparation. This morning, the phone rang. When I answered, there was no voice on the other end, just the sound of a streaming platform notification. Then text appeared on the screen. Final stream begins in 36 hours. Location details to follow. Failure to participate will result in consequences for family members. I haven't spoken to my daughter in Leeds for 3 weeks. I've been too afraid to contact her, worried that doing so might draw attention to her. But this morning, I received a photo message on the mysterious phone. It showed her walking to lectures, clearly taken without her knowledge. She looked tired and stressed, probably worried about not hearing from me The most terrifying realization is that this was always the plan. The initial approach, the gradual increase in payment, the specific requests for certain areas, it was all designed to gather information while slowly drawing me deeper into something I couldn't escape from. They'd studied my financial situation, my relationship with my daughter, my work schedule. They knew exactly how to manipulate me. I keep thinking about how many other people might be involved in similar schemes without realizing it. Delivery drivers streaming their routes, security guards showing empty buildings at night, maintenance workers broadcasting from inside restricted areas, all thinking they're earning a bit of extra money through harmless content creation, not realizing they're providing reconnaissance for something much darker. The phone just vibrated with another notification. The stream is scheduled to begin tomorrow evening at a location that will be sent to me 6 hours beforehand. The viewer count now shows tens of thousands of people waiting, people who have been watching my every move for months, learning my routines, studying my vulnerabilities. I don't know what kind of stream they expect me to participate in, but given what I've learned about the platform's true purpose, I doubt it's anything I'd survive. The empty room with the concrete walls and the drain in the floor keeps appearing in my nightmares. I'm going to try to disappear again after posting this. Maybe if I can stay hidden long enough, they'll lose interest. Maybe they'll find another target. Maybe my daughter will be safe if I just vanish completely. But I'm not optimistic. They've proven they can track me anywhere, through any means. They have resources I can't understand and reach I can't escape. And they have something that makes escape impossible: leverage over the people I care about. If you ever get approached to start streaming your work, no matter how innocent it seems, please think carefully about what you might inadvertently be revealing. The people watching might not be who they claim to be. The request might seem reasonable at first, but lead somewhere much darker. The countdown on the phone now shows less than 30 hours. I need to move again, but I'm running out of places to hide, and running out of hope that I can somehow break free from this nightmare I accidentally created. One innocent stream led to this. One decision to earn a bit of extra money has put me and my daughter in danger. All because I wanted to help someone who claimed to find workplace cleaning relaxing to watch. The viewer count keeps growing. They're all waiting for tomorrow's final stream, waiting to see what happens to the helpful cleaner who showed them exactly how to break into the buildings where he worked. I should never have accepted that first follow request. I still remember the exact moment I realized it wasn't a prank. There was something about the bruises on his face that looked too real, too painful. And his eyes, God, his eyes as he stared directly into that camera. I've never seen genuine fear like that before, not from Jay. It started innocently enough. Just another weird link my friend Jay had found on some obscure forum. He was always sending us these things, supposed red rooms or whatever, from the dark web. You know how it goes, always with a bunch of laughing emojis, like it was all just a big joke. And it always was, until it wasn't. Jay was the kind of person who exhausted you just by existing. Actually, that sounds harsh. Let me rephrase that. He had this constant need for attention that could be draining. He was always staging these elaborate pranks, fake ghost encounters on video calls, prank calls to forum moderators that he'd record, and once he even created this whole fictional stalker just to get karma on Reddit. The guy lived for reactions, any reaction. I usually just went along with it. Never fully believed his stunts, but I'd play along because, well, he was my friend. Sometimes his pranks crossed lines, Occasionally they were genuinely funny, but mostly they were just a lot, too much. So when that Red Room link appeared in our group chat, I didn't even bother clicking. Just another one of Jay's attempts to get us all worked up, I thought. But something felt off that week. Jay wasn't his usual self. He wasn't bombarding the chat with his typical nonsense. He wasn't trying to one-up everyone's stories. He was just quiet. I remember thinking maybe he'd finally grown bored of his own antics. Or perhaps he'd been banned from some platform again. But I kept coming back to the last thing he sent us. Something about this link being legitimate, about using headphones, about being warned. Then he disappeared. At first, I didn't think much of it. Jay had a habit of vanishing for days at a time, usually chasing after some girl he'd met online. He'd resurface eventually with wildly exaggerated stories that none of us believed. But this time felt different. It stretched on too long. On the third day, his mother called me. I still get chills thinking about that call. Her voice had this tremor to it that I'd never heard before. She explained that Jay hadn't been home, that his phone was completely off. I tried to reassure her, told her it was probably just another one of his elaborate pranks. But there was this moment, this awful, gut-wrenching moment, when her voice broke while telling me he'd left without his camera. Jay never went anywhere without that camera. Ever. It was like an extension of himself. That's when I knew something was seriously wrong. I promised I'd come over to check his room, maybe look through his computer for any clues. I wish I could go back to that moment. I wish I'd just stayed home. His room was exactly as he'd left it, messy, full of half-finished projects. I checked his laptop first. Nothing unusual. Just as I was about to leave, I noticed his desk drawer was slightly open. I probably wouldn't have looked inside if it had been closed completely. Funny how such small decisions change everything. There it was, a flash drive hidden behind a stack of old Polaroids, labeled with red marker, if gone. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to just hand it over to his mother, or maybe to the police. But curiosity, or maybe a misplaced sense of responsibility, got the better of me. I took it home and plugged it into my computer. What happened next still haunts me. The drive auto-launched a single file. No name, no extension. Just static at first, and then there was Jay, tied to a metal chair. The lighting was dim, like there was a single bulb hanging somewhere just out of frame. He was gagged. He was crying, trying desperately to communicate something. He looked genuinely terrified. Not the fake scared he'd do for his videos, not acting. This was raw fear. I had to pause it. I physically couldn't continue watching. I remember standing up so fast my chair tipped over. I paced around my room, trying to convince myself this was just another one of his elaborate stunts. Maybe for a film project. Maybe for some weird internet challenge. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. When I finally worked up the courage to look at the drive again, something impossible had happened. There were now 3 videos. I swear on everything I believe in, I hadn't downloaded anything else. I hadn't clicked anything. They just appeared. The second video was worse, much worse. Jay was still in that same chair, but his face was now swollen and bruised. His lip was split open, and his pinky finger, I still have nightmares about this, it was just gone. The stub was wrapped in dirty-looking duct tape and gauze, but it was clearly missing. And the way he looked at the camera, it was like he was looking directly at me, silently pleading, that same light swinging somewhere above him, creating these shifting shadows across his face. You know when something is so horrific your brain refuses to process it? When you keep telling yourself it must be fake? even though every instinct is screaming that it's real. That's where I was, staring at my screen, hands shaking so badly I could barely move the mouse, telling myself it had to be special effects or some digital manipulation. But it wasn't. It was real. It was happening. Then the screen glitched. For just a second, everything went black. When the image returned, there was text on the screen. Just one word: vote. I scrolled down without thinking, and that's when I saw them. 3 buttons below the video: remove left hand, pull tooth, no water for 24 hours. I froze. I couldn't comprehend what I was seeing. Was this some kind of sick interactive video? A game? I didn't mean to interact with it at all, but I hovered my cursor over the no water option just to see if it was actually clickable. The screen blinked. A message appeared. Your vote has been counted. I panicked. I ripped the flash drive out of my computer so violently I'm surprised it didn't break. I ran to the bathroom and threw up. I couldn't stop shaking. I was convinced I'd done something terrible, that I'd somehow participated in whatever nightmare Jay was trapped in, that I'd made things worse. Later that night, after hours of pacing and panicking, I checked the drive again. There was a 4th file. Same setup, same chair, same swinging light. But now Jay was blindfolded, still gagged. There were these horrible marks on his arms, like wires had been wrapped around them and pulled tight. I could barely bring myself to watch, but I forced myself to. I needed to understand what was happening. At the very end of the clip, just before it cut to black, Jay moved his lips. There was no sound, but I could read what he was trying to say. One word: run. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. I kept seeing his face when I closed my eyes. The following morning, I took everything to the police. The drive, the videos, the voting page. I showed them all of it. I was desperate for them to tell me it was all an elaborate hoax, that Jay was fine, that this was just some dark corner of the internet playing tricks on me. But they couldn't say that. Instead, they told me there was no way to trace where the files had come from. The metadata had been wiped clean. The source was encrypted. Whoever was behind this knew exactly what they were doing. They took the drive as evidence and told me not to share anything about this online. Then they sent me home. That was 3 weeks ago. Jay is still missing. His room remains untouched. His camera still sits on his desk where he left it. His mother calls me every day, asking if I've heard anything new. I never know what to tell her. I've deleted our group chat, blocked everyone else who was in it. I don't even open my browser without a VPN now. I've become paranoid about everything digital. Every link, every file, every innocent-looking attachment. Sometimes I dream about that swinging light bulb, that dull, rhythmic sway casting moving shadows. I can hear it even when I'm awake, that faint, creaking sound. The last thing Jay told us before he disappeared was that clicking the link could get us killed. I laughed it off then. I'm not laughing anymore.